Here's my collection of thrift store finds. These are all going to be really fun upcycling, and all of these things that I have here today are easy to find at the thrift store, and I am going to upcycle them all today. None of these projects are going to take a lot of time. They're all going to be really easy to put together, but they're going to turn out absolutely beautiful, and I'm excited to share them with you today. First up is these candlestick holders. We're going to tint these candlestick holders. This is such a fun technique. I have a full tutorial. I'll put the link down below in the description if you want all the measurements and see how to do this. It's basically, I mixed together a recipe of homemade Mod Podge, adding some food coloring, and I'm doing a brown color because I want these to look like that old antique amber. And I'm putting one coat on each of these candlesticks, and then I'm going to let it dry. I'm wearing gloves because the food coloring will stain your hands, and I don't want to have that happen. Speeding up the process, I'm using my heat gun to dry each coat in between, and I'm putting 2 coats on with a brush. Now I've got 2 coats of that stain on this glass. The third coat, I like to use a sponge, and I'm just going to sponge all around. It kind of gives a vintage glass look. I kind of like the look of the little air bubbles in it. Once I have both of them covered, I'm going to set them aside and let them dry. Now I didn't do the back side, I only did the top. And this is not permanent. This will be able to be washed off with some hot soapy water. So you can change it up for the season. I picked up this bag of candles at the thrift store. I love the beeswax ones that I found in there and added them to the candlestick holders. What do you think? I absolutely love them, and this technique is so easy. This will be perfect for right now, and then maybe closer to Easter, I can switch these up and do it in a pink. So many possibilities. Everything that you find does not have to be really upcycled. You can just repurpose it for something else. This is the case with these drink coasters. I like them just as drink coasters, but I was thinking, what else can I do with them? Well, I can put them under a vase. Just kind of makes it look a little bit more expensive. I can put it underneath a plant, just kind of elevates it a little bit. I love the look of this one. You can also put a magnet on the back of it, turn it into a fridge magnet, and it's kind of that boho feel that looks really great on a fridge. So you can kind of just think outside of the box instead of just using it as a coaster. Think of other ways that you can put this into your home and make it beautiful. And if all else fails, put your coffee on it. I love this next upcycle. I found these little finials, and they have little screws in the bottom. They're probably on some sort of piece of furniture, but I had a really great idea. I picked up this Bunt Pan long time ago. I had it in my stash, and I thought, you know what? That's gonna look beautiful on top of that. Got out my E6000, added it around the edge, and put it into that Bunt Pan. I'm going to set it aside, let it dry overnight so it's nice and sturdy, and it's going to turn into a really beautiful little display bowl. You can put flowers in it, you can put any kind of ornaments, seasonal ornaments, or you can just use it for your fruit and vegetables to display on your kitchen counter. I love when I can find projects to upcycle that you don't have to paint and you don't have to do any great big DIYs on them. You can just put one into the other and create something beautiful. Next upcycle that was super simple is I had this old frame that I found at the thrift store. I love the blue. I absolutely love it. But I want to put one of my prints in it. So I've got some coffee stain here that I've got just a piece of computer paper. I put some instant coffee and hot water in a little squirt bottle, sprayed it on this paper. This is a super fast, easy way to coffee stain paper. Get my heat gun, dry it, and that fast, you've coffee stained some paper. I'm going to press it a little bit so it's nice and fast so it can go through my inkjet printer. And this is my butterfly ephemera that I've got in my Etsy shop. If you want to use this for any of your crafting projects, it's absolutely beautiful. I'm just cutting it to size to fit inside of my frame. I cleaned my glass with a little bit of Windex, put it back in the frame, and I'm just going to take my print and put it inside the frame. And once you see this all put together, the blue that was in the butterflies just kind of complements the blue in the frame. Absolutely love it, and especially with that music background. Again, you don't have to be all fancy and do graphic transfers all the time. You can just print off something, throw it in a frame, and you've got beautiful, affordable home decor. Next upcycling project was this candlestick wall holder. I had some black spray paint. I just took it outside. I gave it a coat of the black spray paint, and I had this plaque that I found at the thrift store. It's originally from the dollar store. I think it was $1. And I'm going to decoupage a piece of my scrapbooking paper on top of that. Now, when I find I have thick paper that I want to decoupage with, it doesn't lay as nice. So I have this little hack of thinning out your paper before you decoupage. So I'm just laying packing tape on the back of that paper, taking off that extra layer, and it'll take your scrapbooking paper down to almost a napkin feel. So I'm just going to put some Mod Podge matte all over this plaque, and then we're going to lay that piece of scrapbooking paper that I've made thinner with the packing tape. And it fit best on an angle, so I wanted to make sure that I had it exactly where I want it, press it down into that Mod Podge, making sure that it's adhered really well, pressing right around the edges, and then I'm going to set it aside and let it dry completely. Okay, that's completely dried. I've just got a little piece of sandpaper and I'm just sanding all around the edges, and it's going to leave a little bit of a distressed edge and clean off all of that extra scrapbooking paper. If you're enjoying my content, take a moment right now and hit the like button. Your support means the world to me, and it helps my channel reach more people who will enjoy my videos, and with your help I can continue to create fun and creative upcycles and turning trash into treasures. And I just want to thank you for being a part of my YouTube journey here on my channel. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Now that I have all that extra scrapbooking paper sanded away, I sealed it up with some polyacrylic sealer. I added the candlestick holder onto it and one of the candles from that bag that I picked up at the thrift store. What do you think? I really like it, and I think it pulled together really nice. Okay, next upcycle. This mirror was a disaster. It looks like somebody decided to paint over the mirror. So I'm just taking my scraper. I'm being really careful not to scratch the mirror underneath, but it was coming off really easy. So scraping away, taking my time, and I think I'm going to be able to upcycle this really easy. Hi guys! And now that I have all of that paint, I'm going to take a little tiny bit of sandpaper. This is an 80 grit, and I'm just going to go over and distress any of the high edges. This is all that this needed. It just needed to have the mirror cleaned up and the outside kind of distressed a little bit. And easy thrift store find that I think upcycled beautifully. While thrift shopping, I discovered a charming collection of vintage doilies. Often these are made by skilled grandmothers and donated after their passing, and I love collecting these delicate pieces, particularly those with floral patterns and vibrant colors, which make for a beautiful Easter display. This bag also had some Christmas coasters and a dishcloth, but look at these doilies and how gorgeous they are, and full of Easter colors to display some of our thrifted, upcycled projects on. At the thrift store, I spotted a ceramic duck that was very dated, and I knew it would be perfect for Easter decorations. I decided to use my homemade baking soda paint. If you have not used this, you need to give it a try. It's great to add to your DIY arsenal to give it a textured finish and a neutral color. The paint is great for turning cheap or old items into more expensive looking decor pieces. I'll put a link down below in the description to my baking soda paint recipe because it's fantastic. The ceramic duck had lots of carvings and engravings in it, so I used the baking soda paint to make it smoother and cover up some of that writing. It's really great at camouflaging that, and this made the duck look even more beautiful. For the final coat of paint, I prefer to use a sponge to dab it up and down. This technique creates a stunning stone-like finish, and it enhances the duck's texture. I'm thrilled with how this project turned out, and it's absolutely adorable. I'm excited to share my next project. This little bunny I think was originally from the dollar store. Well, it may have originally been a bargain item. I plan to give it a stunning upcycle makeover. My first step is to remove the little bow and button and then sand off the pink paint on the bottom. Once I've prepped the bunny, I'll paint it all one color to create a uniform and cohesive look. I have no doubt that this simple transformation is going to result in an absolutely adorable Easter piece. All these DIY projects that I'm doing today are easy to do and you don't need any fancy tools. I'm using things that most crafters already have or things that I found at the thrift store. All we need to do is display them nicely in our homes and they make great Easter decorations. Now, once that white acrylic paint has dried, we're going to be using a napkin. This is a napkin I had in my stash. I think it's going to be adorable on this little bunny. It's 3 ply, so I'm taking off the bottom 2 plies and we're going to be working with that top ply that has the pattern on it. We're going to cut the napkin so it's a little bit bigger than the bunny, and we are going to be using saran wrap to bond this napkin to our bunny. If you haven't seen this technique, you need to give it a try. It works fantastic. It's not messy and it bonds really well. I'm cutting a piece of cling wrap or saran wrap a little bit bigger than the bunny. Then we're going to take that 1 ply of napkin and we're going to center it exactly where we want on the bunny. And then I'm going to get some parchment paper and we're going to put the parchment paper over top of that napkin, and I'm using my iron on the highest setting with no steam. And as we do this, it's going to melt that cling wrap and the napkin together and bond it to our little bunny. You want to make sure when you think you're finished to just check around all the edges and make sure that it's bonded really well. And then I'm going in with some 80 grit sandpaper and I'm sanding all around the edges of that napkin. We're going to hot glue that little embellishment back on. And I've taken that little rabbit that I think was originally from the dollar store. I picked it up for 50 cents at the thrift store and I've upcycled it into this darling little piece of decor for Easter, setting it on one of those little vintage doilies. How adorable. I found a metal wagon at the thrift store that looked really old, had lots of chipped paint and 2 little flower pots in the middle, and some of the flowers were chipped on it too. I'm going to take the flower pots out, disassemble it, and give it a refresh for Easter decor. It's going to be a bit of a challenge, but I'm excited to transform this and it's going to turn out absolutely beautiful. It's incredible to turn thrift store finds, which many people see as old and ugly, into beautiful pieces while reducing waste. It's also rewarding to see the potential in something and give it a new life. So let's keep upcycling and making a positive impact. So this wagon, I took some white acrylic paint and I used my sponge and dabbed it all over. Now I want to give it a little bit of a rusty look now that we've painted it white, just so it can kind of look a little bit shabby or primitive. The trick to this is just get a little bit of Mod Podge. Dab it where it would originally have worn, and your trick here is cinnamon. I've got a little bit of cinnamon and I'm just drizzling it wherever I put a little bit of that Mod Podge. And as the Mod Podge dries, that cinnamon is going to stay put and it's going to give a rusty effect. How beautiful is this? So much better than before. To give the pots a terracotta look, I didn't have the right acrylic paint color, so I blended 2 shades together until I achieved the perfect hue. And then I painted the base of both of those flower pots. That was the perfect shade that I was looking for. To bring these flowers back to life, I first cleaned off the dust and dirt, and then I used a dry brushing technique with some yellow acrylic paint. It worked like magic, instantly perking up these flowers and making them look brand new again. To add a final touch to the wagon, I decided to make a little sign using a wooden cutout and my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer technique. I'll transfer the words flower shop onto that little piece of wood, wait for it to dry for 24 hours, and then remove the paper with a damp rag, and it's going to reveal those transferred graphics. If you're new to this technique, check out my channel for all kinds of tutorials. It's so easy and fun to try out. We'll attach it onto the wagon with a little bit of hot glue, which really elevates the look from the original. Once it's all reassembled, I'll display it on one of those vintage doilies that I found at the thrift store, and the transformation is amazing. And it's perfect, not just for Easter, but we can also keep this out for the entire spring season. It's amazing how something most people would pass by at the store can be transformed into something so beautiful again. Taking a cup and saucer from the thrift store, and we're going to turn it into Easter decor. First, we're going to apply some E6000 around the cup's rim and add hot glue to make sure that it stays in place. And then we're going to center it on the saucer, set it aside, let it dry. Super easy. Before assembling, research your cup and saucer and make sure that it's not valuable. Mine wasn't, so then I knew it was okay to put it together. I added a candle, and I've created a lovely Easter centerpiece just with a cup and saucer. This next project is a perfect example of how a quick and simple transformation can turn a thrift store find into a beautiful decor piece that's perfect for Easter. With just a few strokes of some homemade chalk paint that I made, I was able to give these vases a new lease on life. The paint also helped cover up some of those chipped leaves and flowers that had happened on the vase. After letting the first coat of chalk paint dry, I applied the second coat using a sponge to better conceal those chipped areas. Once the vases were fully covered and dry, the transformation was complete, and it is such a simple way to turn a dated thrift store find into something beautiful that we can display for Easter. Actually, these would work out for any time of the year. I just added a little bit of faux greenery, and I think they're absolutely beautiful. I don't think this even needs to be upcycled. I found this beautiful yellow vase at the thrift store, and I paired it with some beautiful faux flowers that I cleaned up with some hot soapy water, and it's already stunning as is, and I think it's going to make a perfect centerpiece for our Easter dinner table. So simple, yet so beautiful. I believe that this would be a perfect addition to a cottage style or granny chic home decor, which is currently really in trend. Here's another example where I found something cute as is, and it didn't have to be upcycled. It's a bunny vase that I added onto a vintage doily and put some faux greenery in it. The simple addition is going to enhance any Easter table centerpiece, so keep your eye out for things like this. I found these cute, amazing little Easter buckets at the thrift store for 25 cents a piece. They were on the 75% off table. After cleaning them with some rubbing alcohol, I'm going to be using my graphic transfers to give these a fresh new look. The graphics that I'm going to be using for this project are available in my Etsy store, but you could also custom make your own with names, so many possibilities. Now this is a label sheet. I look for these at the thrift store. Basically, we want that shiny paper underneath. I'm going to take all of the labels off, and then we're going to print on this with our laser jet printer. Now this will not work on an inkjet. You have to use a laser jet printer. Going to load that sheet into my printer, making sure that we're printing on the shiny side. Here's my two really cute Easter graphics. And now we're getting out our shelf liner. Now I picked this up at the dollar store. You can get a big roll of it. And I'm going to cut 2 pieces of that shelf liner the same size as my graphics. I have a full tutorial on this technique on my channel. I'll put the link down below in the description, because if you have not tried this out, there's so many possibilities with this graphic transfer. We're going to peel off that shelf liner and apply it on the top of that label sheet. Now you want to make sure that you don't wiggle it around. We don't want to mess up that ink. Be really careful. And then once we have it placed down, we're going to use our scraper and really scrape that ink onto the shelf liner, and that's going to make you have a really good graphic transfer. Going to trim it around the edges, and then we are ready to put them on the Easter basket. So you can see the potential here in making some really cute DIYs, especially for kids if you want to design them with their names on them, and then they're going to have their own little buckets to go and collect their Easter eggs. Now you're going to peel off that shelf liner away from that label sheet. The graphic is going to stay on the shelf liner. This is just like magic, and it turns it into a sticker. This is a great technique to do on clear glass too, because it shows up really well. Center it right on that little basket or bucket, and you are ready to fill with your Easter eggs. I picked up this pink fluff and these little Easter eggs I had to pick up at the dollar store. Perfect addition to your Easter decor. I hope this video has sparked your creativity and encouraged you to explore the potential of upcycling thrifted seasonal decor rather than contributing to the overflowing landfills with new purchases. First project, I picked up this votive holder and it had some writing on it, but it was really in good shape and sturdy, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. It was $3.99, but I found it on the 75% off table, so it was a fantastic deal. Cleaned it all up, I painted it with some black chalk paint, let it dry completely, and then I went in and I painted it all with 2 coats of orange. Once the orange was dry, I took an 80 grit piece of sandpaper and I sanded all around the edges just to bring out that black paint from underneath and just give it that rustic feel. I always see these at the thrift store, so they're really easy to find, and when you see what I turn this into, you'll be looking for these the next time you head out to the thrift store. Now I'm going to put some jack-o'-lantern faces on this. I have this graphic in my Etsy store. It's 4 different jack-o'-lantern images. I'll put a link down below in the description, and you can pick it up if you want to do this project after. I'm using my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. I've printed this off on my LaserJet printer on regular computer paper, let it sit overnight, and now I'm just dampening it with a damp rag and water and then rubbing off all the paper, and we're going to be left with really cute faces on each side of this votive holder. If you haven't experimented with this graphic transfer method, you need to give it a try because the projects that you can make with it are unbelievable. And there we have a really cute fall theme votive holder. Next fall decor project, I am mixing up a batch of homemade sand paint. I love using sand paint. It creates really fun texture on your projects. It gives it kind of a stone cement look. This was just a glass bowl that I picked up at the thrift store for a couple dollars, and it's going to turn out perfect. I have a full tutorial on my channel on how to make sand paint. I'll put the link down below in the description. If you've never made it before, you can go back, watch that video, and get the recipe. I'm going to put 1 full coat over the entire bowl, and you can already see the texture starting. Now when I put on the second and the third coat, I like to dab it on. I find it just creates even more texture. And now we've got those 3 coats on, we're going to set it aside and let it dry completely. I haven't painted the inside of the bowl because we're going to put decor in it. So you can see the possibility of so many different projects that you can do with this sand paint, and especially in fall decor, you can do orange and you can do greens and yellows on vases and bowls and plates. Now I'm taking this outside after it's completely dry, and I'm going to seal it up with a polyurethane spray. I glued it on top of a black candle pillar holder that I had, pulled it all together, filled it up with some fall themed decor. It's going to look perfect on my table. Another really easy fall decor DIY is to custom make your own candles. I picked this pillar candle up at the dollar store along with the napkins, and we're going to put the napkin onto that pillar candle. We want to only work with 1 ply of the napkin. And then once we have it separated, we're going to cut it to size to fit all the way around the candle. And this is another DIY that you can see how versatile it is, and you can do it for all the different seasons. Now you're going to need some wax paper. You want to rip off a piece that's a little bit bigger than the pillar candle, and you want to lay the wax paper down with the wax side facing the candle. We're going to put the napkin all the way around the candle, and then we're going to take the wax paper and we're going to bunch it around that candle and hold it really steady in place. And again, make sure you have that wax side facing in towards the candle. Scrunch it all up so you can hang on to it tight. I like to use a tea towel because it does get a little bit warm because we're going to use our hair dryer, and you don't want to burn your hand, so that just helps out a little bit. Now put your hair dryer on the highest setting and the hottest setting, and just to start melting that wax paper into that napkin and candle, and it's going to bond that napkin right into it. Now be careful because it's going to be a little bit warm, but you'll know that it's all done when the napkin goes transparent. Peel off the wax paper, and you've made a custom candle that looks just gorgeous in the middle of your table for the fall season. As we head into the fall and Christmas season, I wanted to share something exciting with you. I've started an amazing Our Upcycled Life graphic club on Patreon. When you join every Friday night, you're going to receive new graphics listed in my Etsy store that week. And by the end of the month, you're guaranteed to have 20 graphics, sometimes even more, as I keep uploading new ones. My Etsy store is packed with fantastic graphics, proven bestsellers, and a wide variety to choose from. It's the perfect opportunity for us to craft affordably. Plus, as a special bonus, you're going to get a 70% off discount code on graphics already listed in my Etsy store, so you can grab your favorite graphics at an affordable price. Whether you're a crafter or a reseller, this graphic club is game changer. With low expenses, you can increase your profits when you're selling your items. Joining this club is like having a treasure trove of amazing graphics. If you're interested, click the link below in the description, sign up, and start receiving your graphics right away. Let's create together and have some crafting fun. I found this glass bowl at the thrift store. It was really cheap and I love the texture in it. It kind of gave me Halloween vibes. I sprayed it with some white spray paint, and then I found these napkins at the dollar store. I'm going to decoupage them onto this glass bowl. I'm taking it down to 1 ply and cutting it so it'll fit around the outside edge of the bowl. And then I'm going to apply my Mod Podge liberally over that whole bowl in sections, adding the napkin as we go along and making sure that we work it right into that pattern in the glass. This is a great project to use your homemade Mod Podge. If you don't have any Mod Podge in your crafting room stash, then you can definitely make some homemade. It's really easy. I have a full tutorial. I'll put the link down below and you can make some of your own homemade Mod Podge and it will work perfect for this project. Once it's completely dried, I'm taking an 80 grit sandpaper and I'm sanding off the edges of that napkin. It leaves a nice crisp line. And then I decided I wanted to put some around the bottom of it too. So I'm going to cut off a piece of that napkin and do the same process that I did before on the sides, just using the Mod Podge and making sure that it's pushed right down into that pattern on the glass so it is adhered well, letting it dry completely, and then sealing it up with some more Mod Podge. And we've created a really cute little dish to hold some Halloween goodies. I found this metal tray at the thrift store. It was on the 75% off table. I think it was like 25 cents. It's not silver, it's just metal. Cleaned it up really well, took the stickers off it, and then spray painted it with some black spray paint. When the black spray paint was dry, I painted it with my white homemade chalk paint. When that was dry, I took an 80 grit piece of sandpaper, sanded all around the edges, and then I added a Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer that says Hello Autumn. I let it sit for 24 hours and then I rubbed the paper off with a little bit of water. And how cute was this upcycle? It was so easy to do, just a little tray and perfect to display for the fall season. Okay, I picked up this glass vase at a thrift store. Needs to be really cleaned. I'm going to clean it up, get all the grease and grime off it so it's a nice clean surface. And then I'm going to start to paint it with my black homemade chalk paint. If you are ever painting a glass surface, I find chalk paint adheres the best. I find if I'm using a latex or acrylic, it tends to peel and chip off. So I always try to stick with a chalk paint, and I have a really fabulous chalk paint recipe. I'll put that link below in the description and you can go and check that out if you would like. First coat has completely dried, and now I'm going to put a second coat on and just apply it over the whole vase. So the next step that I'm going to do, I actually tried this and it didn't really work out all that great. I was hoping it was going to crackle a little bit. So I put Mod Podge over the whole vase, and then I was going to add my white chalk paint on top of it. And as the Mod Podge dried, I was hoping that it was going to crackle, but it didn't very well. So that was kind of a fail. I'm going to go back to the drawing board and see if I can figure out how to get glass to crackle better. If you have any ideas, let me know down in the description, because I thought Mod Podge would crackle. I have lots of luck with the Elmer school glue, but I was out of it, so I tried Mod Podge and it didn't crackle for me. But that was okay because it kind of left kind of a lumpy, bumpy surface on my top coat, and I kind of like that for the Halloween decor. So right here, what I'm doing, I'm just adding a good thick coat of my homemade chalk paint on top of that Mod Podge, and then I'm going to let it completely dry. And this is what it looked like all dry, and I'm okay with it. I think that's going to look all right for the base for this project. I've got some watered down black acrylic paint. I was at the tail end of this bottle, and I'm just going to drip it all along the edges of this glass vase and just let it run all the way down. This is where it starts to get messy. So make sure you have something underneath to catch all of the drips. And I've just taken a little paintbrush and I'm just kind of spreading around that black acrylic paint and just evening it along the bottom. And as you can see, it's just kind of dripped down that whole vase, kind of spooky and eerie looking. And I'm just gonna layer on some fall kind of Halloween colors. I've got some green now. And because I've got the chalk paint on the base of the glass, I can put acrylic on top of that and that will adhere really well. But don't use your acrylic to do your first base coat on the glass surface. And I'm just gonna, same thing, just drip this along the edge and just let it flow wherever it flows. And I know it looks like an awful mess right now, but when it's finished, you'll see how well it works. And just drip it along the sides wherever it falls, squeeze it hard in some places and then just lighter in others. Just let it flow down. And this is a great way to use up all of your scrap little bits of paint that you have laying around. And you can do any kind of theme, Halloween, Christmas, Easter, just mix and match those colors and it'll look fabulous. And there's the yellow all finished. Now I'm kind of letting the paint dry for maybe 5 or 10 minutes between each coat before I put the next one on so the colors don't blend in together too much. And now I love this purple. I think it looks really like a Halloween and just dripping it everywhere all over the vase. Now I'm just going to take my little paintbrush and just kind of blend that purple up to the base of the vase. I don't want any really clumpy bits at the base where it's going to sit. I want it to sit flat. So I'm just kind of blending it in with the paintbrush. This would be such a great DIY craft project to do with your kids too. They would love mucking in all of this paint. Okay, last color. I'm going to finish off with this orange and I'm putting quite a bit on the base of the vase because I want it to cover the whole base, and I'm just kind of taking a small paintbrush, kind of pushing it along and just letting it drip wherever it goes along the side. I'm going to take the heat gun and that will help kind of push it down a little bit too and make it drip a little bit better. And then I am going to just set it aside and let it dry completely overnight. Now you want to really carefully, once you've finished off this last coat, kind of move it out of the way of that puddle of paint that's on that cardboard because you don't want it to dry in all of that puddle of paint. So just kind of move it as gently as you can without kind of ruining any of the drips, and then let it dry completely. Okay, I have this on a clean surface again. I got a little bit of black chalk paint and I'm just putting it on a toothbrush and I'm just kind of splattering black over the whole vase. And just here and there, globs and spots wherever, and that will kind of give it a little bit more of that eerie kind of Halloween feel. Okay, this is the next day. It's really dried really well, and I'm just taking a damp cloth and I'm just kind of cleaning along the top of that vase and taking off any little drips and stuff that might have happened when we were putting all that acrylic paint on, and just kind of cleaning it up and making it nice and neat. Now I'm going to take this outside and give it a really good top coat with this polyurethane. It'll seal it really well. And I ended up actually giving it 3 or 4 coats, and I wanted it to have kind of that real glossy feel. So this is a gloss finish. Now I needed something to put in the vase. I went into my backyard, got a bunch of dead branches, and I had some of this accent stone spray paint. I'm going to spray the branches with it. It just kind of gives it a pebbly texture, kind of lumps and bumps on it, and I thought it kind of gave it a spooky feel. So I'm just going to give it a good coat on both sides and then let them dry completely. And I had some old faux flowers laying around for forever, and I knew that they would work perfect for this project. And I want to give them more of a spooky feel, so I'm going to actually spray the flowers with some of this stone spray paint too. I've had these flowers in my shed for forever, and I knew I would use them for a project, and they worked out perfect for this one. All finished, and I love it, and it's definitely a one-of-a-kind piece. I've added the dead branches and the faux flowers, and I think the colors and everything complement each other. It kind of gives me the Beetlejuice feels, kind of, and I love the little bit of the speckling that I did at the end. Finished it off perfectly. Today I'm going to show you how I'm going to turn this mason jar that I picked up at the dollar store, it's got the little votive holder into it, into a spooky, fun Halloween candle holder. To do this project, you're going to need some polyacrylic sealer. just a little dish, just a Tupperware dish, some computer paper, and I picked up this glitter at Dollarama. It was $4, and I love all the assortment of colors in it. I've taken my mason jar down to the sink, washed it with a bunch of hot soapy water, and now I'm going to use one of these alcohol wipes just to clean it off really well, make sure there's no grease or grime left on it. Now we're going to need our polyacrylic sealer. I'm using satin finish. You can use any finish. It doesn't matter which one you're using. And you just want to pour. This stuff is expensive, so you don't want to waste any. So I'm going to put it in a little dish. Pour it in because we want to coat the whole inside of that jar. And you're just going to swirl it around till it's completely covered. I like to hold it over this little dish in case I spill any, because if you know me and you've been following around, I'm not crafting happy unless I'm making a mess. And then when you have it almost swirled, I like to hold it over the jar and dump in the extra into the jar. You want to make sure you get the neck of it all covered too. And I'm just going to hang on to it for a few minutes just to let all the extra drip out, because we don't want it all pooling in the bottom. It's all completely covered on the inside all the way around. I've dumped the excess that was extra, made sure that it coated the whole thing as I was dumping it out into the polyacrylic jar. We are going to use this orange color. I love it. Looks like a pumpkin. We're just going to take the lid off and just dump it right in to that jar. And I'm going to dump all of it in because that's probably, we'll use most of it. And then just swirl it around. And swirl it around the bottle. Make sure it's getting into all that polyacrylic sealer and all the little areas. Now I have a piece of paper to catch this extra, because what gets dumped out we can put back in the bottle and we can use again. I love this color. It's going to make a fantastic looking pumpkin candle holder. Okay, I think I have it pretty covered, pretty good. And then we're just going to set it aside and let it completely dry. Okay, now we're waiting for this to dry. I would like to make a graphic for the front of it with my Cricut, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Okay, I want to make a spooky Halloween graphic for this candle holder. So I'm going to go into Upload. I have a graphic that I made. It says spooky. I'm going to add that to my canvas. And this is available in my Etsy store. If you're interested in purchasing it, you can grab it. Make sure you use the code SAVE50. You get 50% off all of my graphics. And I'm just going to size it. We're in Canada, so it's centimeters. So I'm going to start at 5 centimeters. I think I want it a little bit bigger. So we're just going to pull it a little bit bigger. Now we're going to make it. I'm doing it on a mat because I'm using a scrap piece of vinyl that I had. I'm going to press done. And then we're going to press continue. Everything looks good and it's connecting with my Explorer 3. And I am using Smart Vinyl Removable. Click on that. And it's sending all the information to the cutting machine. While we're waiting for this to dry, I'm going to put the graphic on it. And I love this little hack. I just have a lint roller and I just press my jar exactly where I want it so it's laying flat and it doesn't roll around, and it's easier to put the graphic on. So we're just going to peel off the transfer tape and we're ready to put it exactly where I want it on the jar. This is such an easy DIY, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't tried the polyacrylic sealer and the glitter on the inside of glass jars, give it a try because it's so cool. You can use so many different colors of glitter and make different bottles for different holidays. First upcycling project involves turning a wooden stand, possibly used for plants, into a basic stool. To begin with, I'm going to measure the legs and make them slightly shorter so they're going to be more of a better length to sit on. After measuring, I'm going to use my jigsaw to cut the legs and ensure that they're all the same length. I was really excited when I had a friend show up with this plant stand because I visioned a stool right away. I'm also going to save those ends that I've cut off because I can put those to use in another project. The paint on this stand almost feels like it might have been enamel based. I probably could have used a paint stripper, but I felt like I wanted to spend a whole bunch of time sanding today. So I put on my 80 grit sandpaper and went to work, and it took a lot of sanding, but I love the results. I see stools like this with really high price tags at high-end stores, so I'm really excited that I'm able to recreate this from a thrift store find for a fraction of the price. To achieve a weathered and aged appearance, I'm going to be using a variety of different tools, such as a chain, hammer, putty knife, some pliers to distress that wooden surface. By intentionally adding these dings and dents and worn corners, I'm aiming to create a farmhouse-like aesthetic that suggests that the piece has been around for over a century. I'm also going to use my utility knife to cut chunks out of the wood here. And while this process may not be for the faint of heart, I assure you the end result's going to be worth it. Once I achieved all of that desired texture, I'm going to go over the wood with an 80 grit sander to smoothen out all those notches, chunks, and preserve that aged look. After completing all the sanding, it's time to apply some wax for that finishing touch. Now here's a little twist. I'm going to use some of my leftover shoe polish from another project as the top coat for this stool. I have some black and clear shoe polish, and I'm going to mix them together to create a shade that's not overly dark. I'm going to apply that shoe wax, and it's going to provide a durable permanent finish on this stool. As I rub it in, all the wax is going to seep into those notches and dings, and it's going to accentuate them, adding that even more to that aged look. It's the perfect final touch. And if you don't have shoe polish, don't worry, you can use your regular finishing wax to achieve the same results. Personally, I'm absolutely in love with how it turned out. This stool is finding a special place in my kitchen, right where it belongs. For my next project, I'm rummaging through my junk drawer in search of 4 old doorknobs. I have this wonderful idea to repurpose them along with a piece of salvaged wood into a fun DIY coat rack. Interestingly, these doorknobs were given to me by a friend who knew I could create something beautiful with them. So here's my take on it. To start, I'm sanding down that salvaged wood using a 120 grit sandpaper to remove all of that outdated varnish. I always ask my friends to save unique items instead of throwing them away. They know I love upcycling and transforming discarded items into something beautiful, and it's my way of reducing waste and avoiding filling up landfills. Instead of burning or wasting these items, I'm giving them a new life and purpose. Did you know you can create a cost-effective wood stain by just mixing instant coffee with hot water? It's a simple solution that works wonders for staining your DIY projects. Try it out and you might be amazed by the results. To attach the doorknobs to the piece of wood, I'm going to be using a product called JB Weld Steel Stick. It's a putty that you mix together, and once it hardens, it provides a secure bond. I also have double-ended screws that are going to fit perfectly into the doorknobs. Here's how it works. I'm going to quickly mold that steel stick, ensuring it's a consistent color, and blend it in and mixed well. Then you're going to insert it into the bottom opening on that doorknob. After that, I'll place the screw into the putty, and as it dries, the putty will act like cement, permanently fixing that screw to the doorknob. And this is going to allow us to securely attach those doorknobs to that salvaged piece of wood. I enlisted the help of my husband because, well, let's just say patience and I aren't best friends, especially when it comes to measurements. With his guidance, we marked the 4 spots where each doorknob was going to be placed on the wood, and then I made a small test pilot hole to ensure that it was going to screw in easy. Now all that's left is to screw in those doorknobs and attach them securely to the wood. Before proceeding, I let these doorknobs sit overnight to make sure that they were dry fully before we screwed them in. Important to remember that everything in this project was obtained for free. The salvage wood was discovered in a pile of discarded pieces, and the doorknobs were generously given to me by a friend. These doorknobs are truly stunning with their unique weathering and patina. I'm grateful that I can bring these materials together and transform what would otherwise have been waste into something truly beautiful. This coat rack is headed to my cabin. It's going to be a perfect addition, and it's going to complement that decor wonderfully. Another find from the scrap metal bin. This poor old little step stool or step ladder is in really rough shape. It's kind of crooked. The legs have kind of been bent a little bit, but I have a fantastic idea of how to upcycle this. I'm going to take everything apart and give it a really good cleaning. Scrape all the loose paint off of it, give it a little sanding, and see if I can straighten up the legs a little bit. I'm not sure if I can, but look at that beautiful red paint that's on the bottom of this. I'm going to try to recreate that red. And I had this red in my cabinet and it matched pretty good. So I'm going to paint all of those wooden steps with the red paint. For the frame of this step ladder, I had this turquoise blue spray paint, which I absolutely love. I think it's going to look beautiful with the red, so I gave everything a really good coat of the blue. Everything's completely dry, and we're going to put it all back together. And here's how I upcycled it. A beautiful spot to keep some of my potted plants. Thrift stores often have an overwhelming number of picture frames, and it can be a challenge to find the perfect one. But taking the time to sort through them is worth it. Recently, I found a beautiful wooden frame that caught my eye. Although I didn't like the print in the middle, I decided to upcycle it. First, I used a scuff pad to remove any imperfections that were on the wood, giving it that rustic look. And then I printed a graphic from my Etsy store on my laser printer. I'm going to give it a vintage touch, and I think it's going to blend better with the frame with a coffee stain. I love the primitive farmhouse style, but feel free to add your own twist on any of these techniques that suits your decor. Coffee staining is a simple way to give plain paper a rustic vintage look. All you need is some instant coffee and some warm water and a sponge. Just dab the mixture all over the print, ensuring that it covers the paper evenly. And then I like to use a heat gun because it dries it really quick and we can get crafting faster. This method is perfect for creating a fast, charming, coffee stained effect on all of your papers, and it's going to work great for this project. I'm going to attach that print with some Mod Podge. I've got my Mod Podge mat and I'm just spreading it out over top of that print that was there before. Now I couldn't pull it out. It had been glued down previously, so it's going to stay put. I'm not going to make a mess trying to rip it out, and I'm just going to glue right on top of it. And if you don't have any Mod Podge in your stash, you can make some homemade Mod Podge. I have a fantastic recipe for that. I'll put the link down below in the description, or you can just use any type of crafting glue. And then to finish it off, I want to seal it up again with that Mod Podge mat. And I'm kind of stippling it on because it gives that old look to the paper, like an old oil painting. What a fantastic thrift store find at such a reasonable price. I might have overlooked it if I hadn't caught my eye amongst all of the sea of frames. So take your time, look through the frames, and you might be surprised what you find. I love this one. What do you think? I came across these wooden pieces at a yard sale actually, and I think they were probably meant for a wooden crate. It would be the end pieces that you hung onto. However, I immediately saw the potential for them to be transformed into cutting boards, and since my cutting boards sell really well, I grabbed them all. I'm going to start by coffee staining them, which I love because it's affordable and easy to mix up. And then I'm going to make them food grade and safe for kitchen use. I'm going to use some butcher block oil. It's important to thoroughly clean and sand them before applying the coffee stain, and then once they're sealed with that butcher block oil, people can confidently use them in their kitchen if they decide to purchase them. So don't forget to check the tool section at the thrift store for scrap wood pieces like this, or when you're out yard sailing. You might find some hidden gems. These wooden scraps won't last long because they have great potential for various DIY projects, so keep an eye out for these as they tend to sell really. I stumbled upon poor little Josh's toolbox tucked away in the back corner of the thrift store surrounded by tools. It immediately caught my attention and I knew I had to bring it home. However, I had to give it a personal touch and make it fit my decor. So I grabbed my 80 grit sandpaper and I gently sanded that entire toolbox to remove all of the lettering. After sanding down all that lettering, I rummaged through my paint stash and I found a red paint that actually matched almost perfectly with the existing color on the toolbox. I felt like it was fate, as if the project was meant to be. I applied a light coat of that paint all over the toolbox to blend everything together seamlessly. While thrift store shopping, remember to pay attention to the items that may seem outdated or easily overlooked. This little toolbox had likely been sitting there for quite a while, just waiting for someone to give it some love. With just a little bit of paint, some sanding, I transformed it beautifully. It's amazing what a small effort can do to breathe new life into neglected items. Instead of using this toolbox as intended, I'm going to give it a twist and turn it into a towel holder. I'm going to attach some sawtooth hangers to the back and making sure that they're even and level, ensuring that they're positioned just right. And with a few screws, the hangers are going to be securely in place. Let me show you a great way to revamp those old dated wicker baskets that you often find in the thrift store. They're quite common but don't always match today's styles, especially with that orange or dark stain. The handles are another issue, not quite appealing. However, removing them with a simple pair of pliers or snips is really easy. Usually the handles on wicker baskets are just pushed into place and not tightly woven in, so removing them is really easy. Next, grab a large Rubbermaid tote and fill it with warm water and add some bleach. And you can just adjust this to how much you want to bleach out your wicker baskets. Submerge them into the mixture, ensuring that they stay in place by adding a rock or something heavy, and then set them aside and let them soak overnight to work their magic. Bleaching the wicker baskets lightens the color as intended. However, the effectiveness may vary depending on the basket's material. This square basket, it responded really well. Well, this other red one, it's a really strong color to remove. So it's a little bit of trial and error, but certainly worth a try. Now that the basket no longer has a dated appearance, I can fill it up with some of my other DIY projects, and I think it looks absolutely fabulous. Use up a whole bunch of scrap stuff that I've had in my shed forever. An old drawer, a teapot with a missing lid, and a door handle. I'm going to take the handle off the drawer that was there already, and I'm going to paint the drawer with some of my crackle paint using the Elmer's glue. I'm going to spread that glue all over that drawer, and then we're going to paint some chalk paint on top of it, and as it dries, you're going to see some wonderful cracks show up all throughout the paint. Once it's completely dried, I had some stain, and I'm going to put the stain over top of the crackle paint. It's just going to age it and give it more of a vintage look. I'm replacing the knob that was on there with this knob so we have a place to hang the drawer when it's all finished. I'm going to tape off the inside of that teapot. I've taken it outside and I'm spraying it with this lovely spray paint. Now the teapot's completely dry. I'm going to take that tape out from the inside and we're going to attach it to the top of that drawer. I'm using this old door pull and I'm going to screw it into the top of the drawer, attaching the teapot. I found this plaque at the dollar store and it's had a piece of paper decoupaged on it. I'm going to rip off that decoupage and get it cleaned down right to the wood, and we're going to turn it into a sign. And to make the sign, we're going to use the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. I designed these graphics, printed it off on my LaserJet printer, made sure to reverse the text. I've painted that little plaque with a couple coats of my homemade chalk paint. I sanded it, distressed it, and then put the graphics on. And now it's been 24 hours. I dampened the paper, rubbed it off, and it's all set. I wanted to age that teapot a little bit, so I took some 80 grit sandpaper and just went around the edges so it looked a little bit more old and vintage. Had this piece of chain that I'm gonna loop onto the top. This spindle that was cut in half is going to go on the bottom. Hang tight with me, this is super cute. This is what I turned it into. A fun little birdhouse. The teapot acts as a little house for the birds to go in. Home tweet home. The little spindle they can perch on. How cute is that? This project, I had this old rusty toolbox in my shed forever, full of little bits and pieces. I cleaned it out because I knew what I wanted to use it for. I went to the hardware store, got some small nuts and bolts because I'm going to attach some brackets onto this toolbox. I drilled 2 holes in each side to attach the brackets, and then we're going to use the nuts and the bolts to attach it. I also put 2 holes in the bottom of the toolbox in case it ever gets any water or anything in it, because I'm going to put this outside so the water can drain out. I'm going to clean it up really well, take the sticker off that was on it, put a couple holes in the back so we can attach it to my shed. I've put a block of wood on my shed because we want to be able to open up the door of that toolbox when it's mounted and there's enough room at the back. And this is what I created with 2 brackets. I attached the toolbox, and now I have a catch-all toolbox on the outside of my shed for all of my gardening tools. This poor little vase has been in my shed for probably since last Halloween. I painted it orange. I'm not liking it right now. I had this cement color oops paint that I found at Home Depot. I turned it into some sand paint, and I'm going to paint over that orange paint with this gray sand paint, and it almost gives it a cement look. So I've turned this orange little pot into this beautiful cement looking planter for my patio. This is adorable. It was a little bit rusty, so I cleaned it all off, gave it a little bit of a sand, and now I'm painting it with my homemade chalk paint. Once it's completely dry, we're gonna put some graphics on with the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. I love this graphic, Farm Life, and I think it's really fitting for this shovel. I'm gonna cut it in half because there's that little bit of the dip in the shovel, and I want the graphics to be able to form around it. Applied the Mod Podge, put it where I wanted it, let it sit for 24 hours, and then we're gonna rub off the paper. Now, a little tip when you're doing projects like this, if you don't want the rust to leach through again, you can always use a spray primer first and then the chalk paint on top of it. I didn't use the primer because I'm okay if the rust does leach through. I sealed it up really well with some engine enamel because it's gonna be out in the elements, and I think this is perfect to put out in the garden at the farm. You can just stick the end of the shovel into a bucket full of flowers, and it's adorable. For this next project, all I used was an old colander that I found at the thrift store, a piece of a spindle, and a wooden ring. I'm going to drill 4 holes in the colander evenly across the top of it, and then we're going to use some twine and measure it out to the length that we need to where we want to hang it. Once it's all measured out, we're going to attach it to that wooden ring and tie it to the colander. I wanted to give it a little bit of character, so I drilled a hole through that spindle, had a piece of wire, and I'm going to attach it to the bottom of the colander. So I've taken a colander and a spindle and a little bit of twine, and I've made it into a really adorable plant hanger that you can put on your porch, and the little dangly spindle on the bottom finishes it off completely. Another thing that I always save from the scrap metal bin are ends of rakes. They turn into really great projects to make into coat hangers or to hang jewelry from. And this one I'm going to put together with a bunch of scrap wood. I had this piece of wood, I think it came off an old antique table. I sealed it up with some penetrating oil, and I had this old chippy piece of baseboard that I'm going to add onto the bottom. I sealed it up with some matte polyacrylic sealer so the paint wouldn't chip off anymore, put on some Gorilla Glue, and I'm going to nail it onto the bottom of that piece of wood. Now, I have no idea where this little bracket came from or what it was off of, but my rake fit perfect into it to hang. So I'm gonna screw it into that piece of wood, and then we're gonna put the rake into it and it'll hold it in place. And this was what I was able to create with a bunch of junk. An old rake, a piece off of a table, an old piece of baseboard, and it's a beautiful piece to hang in an entranceway to keep your keys, or you can keep it in the kitchen and hang some utensils on it. It's gorgeous. Let's make a sign for the garden with a scrap piece of pine. I want to make it look old and vintage, so I'm taking a hammer, really dinging it all around the edges and anywhere where it would have naturally aged. Then I'm taking some stain and I'm going to stain that board completely. It's going to soak into all those little nooks and crannies that we created with the hammer. I just love being able to take a new piece of wood and make it look old and vintage and rustic. Next, we're going to put on a coat of black homemade chalk paint. All these steps might seem like a lot of work, but in the end, it's taking a plain piece of wood and making it look more authentic and making it look better when it's turned into a sign. We're now going to do a crackle paint technique on this. I'm using my Elmer's school glue and I'm pouring a generous amount on top of that paint after it's dried. We're going to spread that glue all over that piece of wood. And then once we have the glue spread out, we're going to let it sit for about a minute. We want it to start to get a little bit tacky. It's all ready now. We're gonna take our homemade chalk paint and in long strokes from one end to the other, we're going to paint on top of that glue while it is still tacky. And you'll see as that paint dries, it's gonna create a crackle finish that looks fantastic and authentic and old. It's completely dry now. I'm going to sand around the edges and we're ready to turn this into a sign. I've printed my graphic off on regular computer paper, sizing it to my project, and then we're going to apply it onto that wood with some Mod Podge. This process will also work with an inkjet printer. I have lots of tutorials comparing the inkjet against the LaserJet on my YouTube channel. You can check that out if you want. You're going to put a light amount of that Mod Podge over the graphic. This product that I'm using is exactly like Mod Podge. I couldn't find Mod Podge when I was looking for it, and this works just as well. I bought this one at Michael's from Deco Art. You have to make sure when you're doing this technique that you reverse your text. If you don't, when you make your sign, your letters will be backwards. It's 24 hours later. I let it dry completely, and now I've got a rag with a little bit of water on it, and I'm dampening the paper so the graphics just start to show through. And then I'm using my fingers and we're rubbing away all of that paper. And as we do that, the graphics are going to stay on our sign, the paper is going to rub off, and it's that easy to make a sign with Mod Podge. I'm going to hang this out in my garden, so I need something to hang it from. I'm drilling a couple holes in the top and I'm going to put through some twine, tie it nice and tightly, and then we're going to seal it up with some polyacrylic sealer. This is an outdoor formula because it's going to be out in the elements and I want my sign to last for a long time. If you're making signs and they're going to be inside, you can buy the water-based polyacrylic sealer for indoors and it works perfect. So that's how easy it is to create your own signs with a little bit of Mod Podge, computer paper, and a piece of wood. What do you think? This might be one of my favorite signs that I've ever made. I made this sign in one of my very first videos when I first started my YouTube channel, and I just love it, and I know some of you probably haven't seen it, so I wanted to share it. This is a piece of salvaged wood from a table. It's an actual table leg, and I'm going to decoupage a beautiful floral napkin onto it. A little trick when you're decoupaging and you're putting more than one napkin on, always like to rip the end that you're going to match the next napkin up with, and it just helps it blend in better. When I do projects like this, it always makes me feel better for not getting rid of all those bits and pieces that I save. The table legs, the spindles, the old rusty bits and pieces, because one day I always put together something that's absolutely beautiful just from junk. Once it was all dry, I took it outside and I sanded all around the edges and got rid of all that leftover napkin, and it blended in beautifully. And now we're going to seal it up with some outdoor polyacrylic sealer. And we're going to use the same technique again, the reverse technique. I use this, like I said before, for almost everything. It's so affordable and easy to do. It sometimes takes a little bit of practice to get the feel of rubbing off the paper, but once you get the hang of it, it works fantastic. You don't have the cost of the vinyl if you're using a Cricut, and with a stencil, you're limited to what signs you can make unless you buy all kinds of stencils. With this, you just download your graphic, print it, and make a sign. I want to hang my sign to the table leg. I've got these fence staples, you can find them at the hardware store, and this old chain, and I'm going to attach the two together. And the sign is all ready for the paper to be rubbed off. And we're going to seal it up with our polyacrylic sealer. I had two of these table legs. I made a vintage garden and the fresh flowers, and I absolutely adore them. That floral napkin looked perfect on the legs, and the signs finished them off. I've got a lot of signs that I'm showing you today because there's so many ideas of stuff that you can make for your outdoor decor or your garden. This one is made on a piece of pallet wood, and I'm going to make a flower market sign. I've sized the graphics to fit on this piece of pallet wood, and we're ready to use the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. A free piece of pallet wood made beautiful. This is a fun one. I did this one recently with pallet wood and cling wrap, and it's just a painting technique that's really great to do with kids and lots of fun. Get out all of your acrylic paint, all the different colors, and we're gonna mix and match, and we're just gonna drop paint here and there on the board. Doesn't matter, this is just for fun, and it doesn't matter if it's messy or if you get too much in one place and not enough in another. It'll all turn out perfect. And then you're going to get a piece of saran wrap or cling wrap and lay it right into that paint. And this is where it's lots of fun with kids. Just let them use their fingers and blend all of that paint in together, and just keep blending until you get the color that you like. And when you're blending 2 or 3 colors together, you're making other colors. It's just so much fun. And these are beach and pool theme. I'm doing a beach sign and I'm doing a hello summer sign. Love the way that they turned out. The first project that I'm going to work on is this pitchfork. I actually got this pitchfork quite a while ago from the dump. Dug it out, brought it home, and I painted it back then with some chalk paint, and it started to weather a little bit. So I'm going to refresh it with some of my homemade chalk paint, and I'm going to put a really pretty graphic on it. Okay, my chalk paint has completely dried, and now I'm going to put this welcome graphic on it. If you've been following my channel, you know I love my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer to put on my graphics, and that's what I'm going to use for this project. I've printed off this graphic on my LaserJet printer. Make sure you reverse your text if you want to do a project like this, just on regular computer paper. And all the graphics that I'm using today in all 3 of my projects are available in my Etsy store. I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat, and I'm just going to put a light coat over the whole graphic. Make sure you're covering the whole piece of paper, and then I'm going to flip it over and center it where I want it on my pitchfork, and then rub any wrinkles or bubbles out so it's nice and smooth. I have quite a few tutorials on my channel that go really into depth into this method. If you want to learn how to do it, I'll put a link down below in the description so you can go back and you can watch those, and I'll show you a more thorough step-by-step tutorial. Now my graphic has completely dried. I've let it sit overnight, and I'm just taking a damp rag and I'm just wetting that paper just so you can start to see those graphics through, and then I'm going to rub off the paper and you're left with a really pretty graphic. I've sealed it up with some outdoor polyacrylic sealer, and look how cute this is. These look so cute, propped up on your porch, some flowers around them for a farmhouse feel. Old milk can that I have had on my porch for quite a while. The paint has faded on it, so I'm going to refresh it. I'm going to put on a coat of my homemade black chalk paint over the entire milk can. And I'm going to put a customized graphic on this of our last name and the year that we were established. I'm going to make my graphic the size of a piece of paper. So I'm putting this on just as a guide so I can tape off the area that I want to paint with some white chalk paint. And if you want to do a project like this, make sure you use some good painter's tape so the paint doesn't bleed through when you paint it on. So now that I have all the tape on, I'm going to peel that piece of paper away, and I have a perfect square the same size as a piece of paper. And I'm just going to take my white chalk paint and I'm going to paint in between that square, and it'll probably take 2 or 3 coats to get it covered really well. If you're interested in me doing one of these custom graphics for you with your last name and a year on them, I do have it listed in my Etsy store, so you can head over there and check it out, and I can custom make you one. Now this is completely dried, and I'm just going to peel away that painter's tape, and I'm left with a perfect square. And this is the graphic that I'm going to use on my milk can, and I think it's the perfect graphic at a front door. And again, I've put this in my Word program, sized it to the size that I want it, printed it off on my LaserJet printer on regular computer paper, and I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat, and I'm going to put it right in that painted square, and then I'm going to flip it over after I've got all the Mod Podge on, get all the wrinkles and bubbles out of it, and then I'm going to let it sit overnight and dry really well before I rub off the paper, and the graphics will be left on my milk can. Okay, everything is completely dried. I'm taking a rag, just dampening it till you can start to see the graphics through, and then rubbing off all of that paper. Now I wanted to show you, sometimes not all the graphics turn out perfect. I was rubbing this and a little piece of the G kind of rubbed away. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to add a little bit of Mod Podge right on that black ink of where it rubbed off, and then press it down exactly where it goes on that graphic and line it up really well. And then I'm going to set it aside and let it dry really thoroughly, and it should fix itself and have that black ink transfer back onto that graphic on my milk can. I just wanted to show you that not every graphic that I do turns out perfect, and it takes a little bit of patience and a little bit of practice to get the hang of it. And even with me doing these graphics for a lot of years, I still have some that don't turn out perfect. But I love the way that this one turned out. It just kind of gives it that farmhouse feel and kind of rustic look. I'm going to seal this milk can with some polyacrylic sealer outdoor. You want to make sure if this is going to be outside in the elements, you're using an outdoor formula to make sure that it's sealed really well. I'm so glad I finally got around to kind of sprucing this milk can up. It's been sitting at my front door and it's kind of looked dingy, and it's one of those projects that I never really got around to doing, but I love it now and I can't wait to get it at my front door. Love the graphic also. And if you're interested in me making a personalized graphic for you to do a project this, make sure you head over to my Etsy store and check it out. The third project is a face off of an old antique dresser. I couldn't get the handles off of it, so I thought I would just leave it, and then I would use the other side to make into a farmhouse welcome sign for my front door. So I flipped it over, and I'm going to paint the back of that dresser door with some black chalk paint, and that's going to be the front of my sign. I love my homemade chalk paint recipe, works fabulous. I'll put a link down below in the description so you can go and check out that recipe and mix some up for yourself. Now I'm going to use some Vaseline along the edges of this sign so I can make it look chippy and vintage, and I'm just putting some on my fingertip and I'm just putting it anywhere on the sign where it would have some natural wear all around the edges and on the top and on the bottom. And then I put on a coat of some brown chalk paint. Gonna put on some more Vaseline on top of that brown chalk paint, just in random little spots around the edges. And then anywhere you've put the Vaseline, the paint will not adhere to it and it'll show the color underneath of it. And now I'm going to put a coat of my homemade white chalk paint, and then I'm going to put another coat of my white homemade chalk paint, and then I'm going to take it outside, give it a really good sanding with a coarse sandpaper, and you'll see all the chippiness that that Vaseline leaves and shows all those different colors through the edge of the wood and gives it a real rustic, really vintage look. Now we're ready to put the graphics on. Again, the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer, I love it. This is the graphic that I'm going to use. Welcome to our home. I have put the graphic into my Word program and I have sized it to fit my board, and I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat. If you've bought my graphics, or if you have made your own graphics and you're not really sure how to reverse or how to size within your Word program, I have a full tutorial on how to do that. I'll put a link down below in the description and you can go and watch it and it'll help you out. This is set overnight. I'm just taking a damp rag, I'm just dampening it, just so you can start to see the graphics show through. You want to be really careful because if you put too much water on this, it will take the graphic away and you'll rub it off as you're working away on it. So it kind of takes practice to see how much water you'll actually need to take off the paper. And once you get that technique down, you're golden. And this type of sign, you can put a hanger on the back and hang it on your door, or you can just prop it up beside your door and it looks fantastic too. And now I'm just going to put a coat of my polyacrylic sealer in an outdoor formula and seal it up really well. And our welcome to our home sign is all finished, and I love the way that turned out, and I love it even more that I was able to upcycle an old front of a dresser drawer that was in the landfill and make it into something that was crappy and make it pretty. Found these fabulous candle lanterns in the dump. They were dirty, they were really sun bleached, but they were still in really good shape, and I knew I could perk them up and make them beautiful again. I'm going to take the handle off the one lantern. It just has a jump ring and I can just squeeze it apart and take it off, and I'm going to put some masking tape around that metal piece because I don't want it to get any spray paint on it. Taking it outside, and I'm just going to give it a light coat of white spray paint. I want to give it that sun bleached white color. Obviously, somebody didn't see the potential that these lanterns still had because they turned out beautiful just with a real light coat of spray paint. and brought it back to life for free. The glass votive holder on the inside of the one lantern was still there, was not broken. I cleaned it up and put in a little tea light. And the other lantern, back in one of my older videos, I made some candles with a tuna tin can, and that's one of those, and it fit in there perfect. And look how gorgeous these are. Sun bleached kind of white look, much better than the before, and they're ready to put out on my patio. Second project is this old lantern that I found in the scrap metal bin. It's really rusty, but it has so much character, and I want to preserve that rust. I don't want to paint it. So I'm taking my engine enamel and I'm going to give it a really good coat and seal in all that gorgeous rust. I love using the engine enamel for this type of a project. It seals it up really well so you can put it out in the elements, and you can find it at an automotive store, or you can also find it on Amazon. And I'll put the link down below in the description so you can check that out. The engine enamel that I bought has a bit of a gloss finish, and it just made that rust pop. I love it. In one of my previous videos, I did some tin can upcycles, and I made this tin can. I loved it and wasn't quite sure what to do with it. I know what to do with it today. I made a homemade napkin and decoupaged it on top of this tin can, and it fit in this lantern perfect. I added an ivy, and it is going to look gorgeous on my front porch. I've taken this rusty, dull looking lantern and made it into a beautiful piece of outdoor home decor. And I think the choice to save that rust color was the perfect one. I found this old birdhouse, and it has definitely seen better days. The paint that was on it has completely disintegrated on it, and some of the nails were popped out, and it just needed some TLC, but it was still in good enough shape that I'm going to be able to fix it up. Just taking my hammer and just pushing in any of those nails that had started to pop out, and then I'm going to give it a really good sanding with an 80 grit sandpaper so it'll be ready to paint. I am loving this yellow paint. I love picking up these little testers too. It's just the right amount of paint for a couple projects. And I'm also loving this paintbrush from Zebra, the Palm Pro. It works fantastic to get in all those little nooks and crannies on your small projects. I love all of their paintbrushes, and they have different types for different projects. I'll put the link down below in the description, and you can head over to their website and check them out because it is a must for paintbrushes. I thought the blue was going to really complement the yellow, so I'm going to do a salt painting technique on the roof to give it a rustic kind of chippy look. I'm going to paint on the paint. This is just a regular latex paint, a sample that I bought at Home Depot, and I'm just painting it all over the roof. And then once I have that done, while the paint is still wet, I'm going to sprinkle on pickling salt. You can use any type of salt, but the pickling salt, I like the texture that it gives and the chippiness. It's just a nice coarse salt. And just sprinkle it right into that wet paint. Once everything's all dry, I'm taking it outside because it is messy, and I'm sanding it down with my 80 grit sandpaper. I think it turned out fantastic. I love the chippy feel, and I'm going to add some embellishments. I found this old door pull and this dresser drawer pull, and I'm going to add them onto the birdhouse just as some focal points. And that looks 100% better than that birdhouse that I found in the dump at the wood pile. I was able to upcycle it and make it pretty again, and it's ready for some renters. Now, this is a whole bunch of things that I found put together. This wire basket and this wooden trivet. I'm not sure what it was off of or where it was from. It's really sturdy and beautiful. I knew I wanted to use that in this project, and an old spindle off a table. I'm going to give the wire basket and the trivet a coat of black spray paint. I find sometimes when I find things, I just tuck them away and it takes a while for me to get inspired and figure out what I want to do with them. And this is one of these projects. I had all three of these things tucked away and it just all of a sudden came to me and I put it together. I drilled a hole down the middle of the trivet and I'm doing a little test hole in the bottom of the spindle and I'm going to screw those two pieces together. I'm using these staple nails to put the basket on top of the spindle. It was a little tricky to get that hammer in and out of there, but I made it work and I got it on there nice and sturdy. And I've created a beautiful planter with just junk. The wire basket, the spindle, and that trivet on the bottom, and it all pulled together beautifully. So that's why sometimes I can create these wonderful projects because I don't throw anything out because you never know when you're going to need it. Project, we're going to upcycle this glass coffee jar and a solar light from the dollar store. I want to paint the glass jar, and the first step that I like to do when painting glass is to give it a light spray of primer, and then I had some of this accent stone spray paint. I wanted to give it a little bit of texture and it works fantastic for that. I'm going to take the stake out of the bottom of the solar light, fill up that glass jar with some gravel from my driveway, get out my E6000 and put a little bit around the rim of that glass jar and just set the solar light into it. The weight of the gravel in the glass jar keeps it from tipping over, and I added some twine around the neck of it for embellishment, and once the sun goes down, the solar light will light up. First upcycle today is this vintage jewelry box that I found at the thrift store. I see these all the time and they're always priced really reasonably, but I find they just look really dated. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to upcycle this one. First thing that I'm going to do is pull out these little knobs, and they just come out really easy. They just pop right out. And then I'm going to take out the innards of this jewelry box. Most of the time when I find these, they're dusty or dirty and stained. So I prefer just to take it all out. If you find one and they still look nice, then leave it in, but my preference is to pull it all out. And when you see what I do with it afterwards, you might want to pull it out also. Sometimes it takes a little bit of a scraper, and if you have a little bit of glue residue, I find if you spritz it with some water, let it soak for 10 minutes and then scrape it, it'll all come out nice and clean. Now, I'm unsure what kind of wood these jewelry boxes are, but they scratch really easy. So I'm just going to take that top layer off with a scuff pad and just scuff it all over, and that's going to allow the paint that we're going to use after to stick better. I'll put a link down below in the description for this scuff pad and you can grab some. And then I'm just taking a wipe and I'm just wiping it down nice and clean. Now we're ready to paint. For the first coat, I like to use a primer. So I'm using this bin primer, and it'll allow any paint that I put on top of it to stick really well. Because this is a really shiny surface, we want to make sure we have a bond. Once that spray primer was all dry, I went in with my homemade white chalk paint and I painted the entire jewelry box. If you've not tried making some of your own homemade chalk paint, you should give it a try because it works really well and it's affordable. Some of the store-bought chalk paints can be really expensive, so this is a really great alternative. This jewelry box took 2 coats of the chalk paint, and once it was completely dry, I went back in with a piece of sandpaper and I'm using a 120 grit, and I'm just distressing around the edges. I just like the look of that. You can skip this if you're not into that farmhouse distressed feel, but I really love it. These little jewelry boxes make really nice gifts, so I always grab them when I see them. So we have this all distressed now. I really love the way that it's looking, and we're ready now to go on to the next step. I am going to put a graphic on the top of this jewelry box using my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. Using some Mod Podge matte and a graphic that I printed off on my laser printer. Make sure if you're doing this technique to reverse your text. This graphic is available in my Etsy store if you want to grab it and it's already reversed. I'll put the link for that down below in the description. With this technique, you're just putting a light coat of that matte Mod Podge across the entire graphic. Now, if you don't have a laser printer, don't worry, you can also do this with an inkjet. It just takes a little bit more time and it has more of a distressed look, but it can be done. We're just gonna lay that graphic, make sure it's centered, and then press out any bubbles or wrinkles. And then we're going to set it aside and let it dry for 24 hours. While we're waiting for that to dry, I picked out a piece of scrapbooking paper that I really loved, and we're gonna line the inside of that jewelry box with the scrapbook paper. I've cut it to size to fit in the top and the bottom drawer. I'm putting down some Mod Podge matte and then sticking that paper on top. This is why I like taking out the insides of these jewelry boxes, because you can customize it so nice with so many different papers. It's now the next day. I'm taking a little bit of water and a damp cloth and I'm wetting that paper until you can just start to see the graphic show through, and then I'm rubbing it off. And as we're rubbing off the paper, that graphic is going to stay on our little jewelry box, and we're transferring a graphic really easy and really affordable. I sealed everything up with a polyacrylic sealer, and here's our upcycled jewelry box. How cute is this? And I think I picked this up for $3.99, and I think one of my nieces is going to love this at Christmas time. Next upcycle is this coat rack that I found at the thrift store. It was really sturdy, except the hooks on the top were broken. There was 3 of them where the top hook had just snapped right off. So we're gonna upcycle this and turn this into something very rustic and cabin-like that I can put at my log home here. I'm gonna take these broken hooks off first. This very quickly turned out to be a bit of an issue because they had really not only screwed these in, but glued them down really well. So I knocked them off the best I could with a hammer, and then I took a chisel and I took off the rest. I'm going to be able to clean it up when I get back to my shed with a sander. 80 grit sandpaper on my sander, and I sanded down the best I could where those hooks were. And now we're ready to distress this coat rack. I'm going to sand the entire coat rack and try to get that first layer of really orangey stain off. And then I'm going to go in with my hammer and I'm going to ding it all up and nick it and try to make it look like it's been an old worn piece of wood. You can also distress with a wire wheel, and this will give a really great aged appearance. You just have to be really careful with these. Do not wear gloves and hang on to your drill really tightly, because if this gets away on you, you can really hurt yourself. So if you're going to do this technique, just take some extra caution, but you can see that it's really aging up that wood really nice. And I'm happy now with how distressed it's looking. I got most of that stain off. I'm not really picky about it getting it completely cleaned off, but I'm happy with how distressed it looks now. I had some mist tint stain that I picked up at the hardware store, and that's what we're going to use on this project. And I'm just going to go over the entire coat rack. We're now ready to add the hooks back on. I picked these hooks up off of Amazon. I love the farmhouse cottage feel of them. I'm going to screw them back on where those other hooks were before. And I love the way this turned out. And we all know how much lumber costs. And to put a coat rack together for the price that I paid at the thrift store, I wouldn't have even been able to come close. So I love this upcycle. Love the hooks, and it fits in at the cabin really nicely. This next upcycle was a lot of fun. When you're at the thrift store, look for items like this, the back massagers or the beaded chairs that you put in your vehicles, because you can take them apart. I paid $2.99 plus I had a discount code at Value Village, and you're going to get all these huge beads that you can craft with. So keep your eye out for those. I have this yarn that I also picked up at the thrift store, and we're going to turn this into a garland. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to make really pretty tassels. I got my cell phone and I wrapped the yarn around about 30 times, and then I tied it at the top with a really tight knot, cleaned up all the extra little bits of yarn hanging down. Now I'm going to make a loop. I'm going to put the loop at the top of the tassel, and then I'm going to cut the yarn, and then I'm going to wrap the other end of that loop around the tassel really tight, and that's going to make the top of our tassel. I do have a full tutorial that goes a lot slower and more detailed instructions on how to make a tassel. I'll put that link down below in the description. Once you have it wrapped around and you like the way that it looks, we're going to take that end that we just cut and loop it through that loop at the top, pull the bottom portion of that loop string through, and we have tightened that around our tassel, and it's tucked away nice and neat, and you're not going to see any knots. And then you can just trim away the extra pieces of yarn. Cut the end of your tassel, and now you can grab a coffee or tea and you can unravel all the bottom pieces of that tassel, and it'll make it look nice and fluffy and full. Now let's get using those beads. I've got 3 strands of the yarn, the length that I want my garland to be, and I'm just going to tie a knot and attach it to one of those tassels. You can also look in the jewelry section of the thrift store. You can always find some really beautiful beaded necklaces or bracelets that you can take apart and upcycle into garlands like this also. And now I'm just going to thread through all of these beads. And if you're having a hard time getting your yarn through the beads, I always like just to get a piece of tape, and you can tape the end of your yarn, and that'll keep the pieces together and make it easier to thread through your beads. Beaded garland with beads this big are really pricey, so this was a really fantastic upcycle. $2.99 for the beads with a discount code, yarn that I already had that I bought at the thrift store ages ago, and I've put together this beautiful garland. I wanted to show you the cutest little chair that I found at a yard sale the other weekend. It was $5. It's in really rough shape. I don't want to do anything to it because I love the patina, so I sprayed it with some outdoor polyacrylic sealer and tucked it into my garden. I've added a mum on it and using it as a plant stand. I think it's so cute, and it's tucked away a little bit out of the elements under the eaves of our log home, so hopefully it'll last for a lot more years. Not every upcycle has to be really difficult, and all I wanted to do on this one was just change the color of the base. I wasn't really feeling that silver look, so I taped off the bottom and just sprayed it with some of my black matte spray paint. I think it's just going to update it just a little bit, and it'll match my decor much better. So I'm just letting it dry, and then I'm going to take it into my dining room. I'm going to add a little tea light And I think it just looks much better with that matte black on the bottom than the cheap looking silver. Which do you like better, the silver or the black? And I can also maybe go back in with some rub and buff. That would be nice also. I also wanted to share with you this attendance plaque that I found from the 1930s. Somebody was just discarding this, and I think it would be really beautiful tucked into a gallery wall or something like that. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it yet, but I'm going to tuck it away. I'm not going to upcycle it because I think things like these need to be saved and not taken apart. This is the first thrift store frame that we're going to work on, and this is an easy one because it didn't even have a print in it, and it's really easy to take apart. We're just going to remove the back and the pieces of cardboard and the matte frame, set that aside, and I have this piece of paper that I've painted some of my previous DIY projects on, and I love all the different variations of the different colors from my different projects. I want to add a little bit of depth and interest though to it, so I took some acrylic paint, I grabbed one of my tin cans, and I'm going to stamp some circles just randomly on it, and I really love the contrast of this blue color. This is such a thrifty way to upcycle frames because we're just using an old piece of paper that otherwise most people would have just thrown out. But I kind of think it almost looks like an abstract painting. I've got some stamps that I'm going to use too. I've got some of my yellow acrylic paint, and I'm just going to roll it in the corners or wherever I think that it needs a little bit more interest. Thrift store frames are something that you can find really easily in every thrift store. Just sort through, find things that catch your eye or are a little bit more original, and there's so many ideas of how you can upcycle them. I've got 4 projects today, so make sure you stick through to the end because there's some really fun ones that are really thrifty and you can do on a complete budget. I also had a little flower stamp. I'm just stamping in little areas here and there. I kind of like the way that it looks now. I think it's just about ready. I'm going to set this aside and let it dry completely. Now it's dried completely, we're going to add it back into the frame, putting it all together. I'm going to tape it at the top with a little bit of packing tape so it stays in place. Put the backing on, put the staples back in, and then we're going to head into my craft room because we're going to break out my Cricut. I don't use my Cricut very often, but this is a project that is perfect for it. I got out some permanent vinyl. I designed a graphic. This graphic's available in my Etsy store, so once you see this finished project and if you like it, you can head to my Etsy store and check it out. And we're cutting it. I'm going to weed all that extra vinyl off, and then we're going to stick this onto the front of that glass on the frame. And it kind of gives it almost like a 3D effect. Of course, you can use any type of quote or picture and put it on the glass on top of your print, and you can personalize it. So many ways to do a project like this, just use your imagination. But I love being able to use that piece of paper underneath that I did previous DIY projects on and incorporate it into this thrift store frame upcycle. What do you think? I absolutely love it, and it's definitely one of a kind. Next thrift store frame upcycle. This is an old antique frame. It didn't have any backing, but I love the ornate frame. And I've got a perfect thing that I can complete this project with. I first had to cut a piece of wood to fit on the inside of this frame. I had a piece of scrap veneer wood. I used my jigsaw to cut it to fit the frame. And then I found this tapestry at the thrift store. It was in with the linens. Gorgeous. Somebody has spent so much time on this, and I can't believe it just getting donated to the thrift store. I did an absolute happy dance, and I think it's going to be really beautiful to display in my fall decor. I'm going to make sure I'm putting this centered in that frame, and then I'm going to fold over that extra material. I'm not going to cut any of this because I don't want to do anything to the original piece in case I ever want to take it off and use it for something else. And then I'm using my staple gun, and I'm just going to really carefully pull it nice and tight and staple it all along the inside. So some other ideas when you're at the thrift store is to go into the scrap fabrics or linens or pillowcases or tea towels. There's so many that would look beautiful framed in those old vintage ornate wooden frames. So I love the way this turned out. Somebody has spent so much time creating this, and I'm glad that I was able to upcycle it and make it beautiful again. This is a vintage frame, probably from the 70s. It's that plastic molded frame, and the print inside is in horrible shape. It's really sun faded, and it was only $3.19. Yes, this had to come home with me because I knew I could upcycle it. And trust me, you don't have to be an artist to do this upcycle. I know nothing about oil painting or watercolor paints. I just have cracked out my acrylic paint, and I'm kind of thinking back to what the original color of this print wouldn't be, and then using my acrylic paints to match it the best I can. And I'm kind of dabbing up and down. In the areas of the grass, I'm using this beautiful green, and by using that dabbing motion, it kind of gives the illusion that it's that original oil painting. And I'm just going to go through and I'm going to work away on this whole print and make those colors vibrant again. This turned out absolutely beautiful, and for $3.19 I was able to save this print, and when it was finished it looks like a oil painting. So look through the thrift store frames. If you see something that's sun faded or just doesn't look as vibrant anymore, you can try this technique. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Oil paintings are never really perfect, so give it a go. I'm also going in with a little bit of Kleenex and just dabbing it here and there to give it a little bit more texture to and to blend it in. Now this was just a print, it wasn't an original. But you could even do this on a original oil painting or watercolor painting. Just make sure before you do that you're making sure that it's not worth any money or that it's not a collectible. We don't want to be ruining somebody's original artwork. This, of course, is just a print, so we were good to go. This project I found was so relaxing. I went out to my shed, I put on a podcast, I made a cup of tea, and I just worked away at this, and it took me about an hour. I thoroughly enjoyed this project. So relaxing, blending paints and dabbing it up and down. Definitely going to be looking for more projects like this to do at the thrift store. Now we have this all painted and finished. It's much more vibrant, way better than the before, but I still want to seal this up. So I'm going to get out my Mod Podge. I'm using my Mod Podge mat, and I'm going to pour a little bit in a dish, and I'm going to take my paintbrush and paint over this entire print with a sponge. I want to dab it up and down so it gives that authentic oil painting look. It just gives it some texture. And once that first coat was dry, I took some of my instant coffee and warm water and added a little bit of Mod Podge in it. I want to kind of give it that sepia look, that aged vintage look of an old oil painting. and I'm going to just brush it on with my paintbrush, doing strokes every which way. Again, that's going to give it that look of that old oil painting. So as I'm finishing this project up, I found there was a little bit too much gold showing in the ornate frame. So I'm just going over it with some of my black homemade chalk paint just to tone it down a little bit. And then I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to go back in with a baby wipe and just wipe off the top bits of that paint on all that ornate frame. And I think we're just about done. This might be the best $3.19 that I've ever spent on a thrift store find for the way that it turned out. This isn't so much a thrift store frame, but it's a wooden plaque, $1.99. How can you not grab this and bring it home and upcycle it? It had this really ugly blue color already painted on it, so I'm going to distress it a little bit. I'm going to put on some black homemade chalk paint over the whole frame, let that completely dry. Then I'm going to add some Vaseline around the edges. This is just going to create a chippy finish when it's all done, kind of give it that authentic look. This is a really great easy technique if you have a piece of brand new wood and you want to make it look old. And now I'm going to paint over top of that Vaseline and black paint with some white homemade chalk paint and just paint the whole plaque, let it dry. Then I'm going to go in with my sander. I've got some 80 grit sandpaper on my palm sander and sand all around the edges. And now we're ready to upcycle this wooden plaque. I had this old piece of newspaper and I am going to decoupage it onto the front of this plaque using my Mod Podge mat. Now, a trick to decoupaging is to not use very much Mod Podge or you're going to get wrinkles. Inevitably, you're going to get some wrinkles, but if you don't want to get a lot, don't goop up on the Mod Podge. Just put a light coat. You don't need very much. Spread it right out to the edges, and then we're going to lay that plaque into that newspaper and pressing it down firmly. We're going to flip it over and then we're going to rub out any wrinkles or any bubbles that might have happened. Again, with this project, you can put your own twist on it. You could use tissue paper, wrapping paper, so many possibilities. I just love that farmhouse look, so I've kind of gravitated to this old piece of newspaper. It's completely dry. Now I'm going in with a piece of sandpaper and I'm lightly sanding around the edge, and you can see how it gives you that nice, crisp, clean, sanded edge to work with your project. Now we're going to go in with some instant coffee and warm water, and we're going to age up this newspaper a little bit. We're not going to soak it. We're just putting a light coat across that whole newspaper, and you can see as soon as I introduce it onto that, how it gives it that vintage feel. I put this outside in the sun to dry completely, and now we're going to bring it back into the shed, and I've got some polyacrylic sealer and I'm sealing up this paper. You don't need very much, just a light coat. Again, if you're putting on too much, you're going to introduce those wrinkles and bubbles to come back into your paper. So just a light coat. We're going to set this aside and let it dry. I had this smashed tin can that I made quite a while ago in one of my tin can videos. I used my Cricut to add the label on the front, and I had this old hook. We're going to put the hook in the top of the plaque, put some floral foam in that tin can. I had these old flowers that I dried a long time ago from Valentine's Day that I'm going to incorporate into it and make a beautiful arrangement. And then we're going to pull it all together. We're going to hang that tin can on the front of that hook. I also added a hook on the back so we can hang it up. We don't want to forget about the hooks on the back. And all of this was put together so affordably. a tin can from the recycling bin, a plaque for $1.99, an old piece of newspaper that I had, and I love the way that it turned out. This right here is why you put word out to your friends and your family that you are an upcycler, because this cabinet was given to me by a friend who was cleaning out his parents' home and didn't have a spot for it in his own, and knew I was an upcycler and I could probably do something with it. So I grabbed it from him, of course, and I put it here in our home. Now I do find that it just kind of blends in. It just is too much wood on wood on wood. So I think what I'm going to do, because it fits absolutely perfect in this spot, I think I'm going to give it a little bit of an upcycle and maybe use some black chalk paint. So, got lots of work. Let's get going on this free cabinet. If you're new here, my name is Deidre from Our Upcycled Life, and I love showing you how you can transform and upcycle projects into beautiful home decor on a budget. Today I'm going to be sharing lots of great ideas and tutorials on how to turn everyday items into stunning pieces for your home. I love repurposing old furniture, especially when you can find it free or really affordable. You're going to be amazed what you can do with a little bit of creativity and some inexpensive materials. Make sure you watch through to the end for a variety of different projects that will fit any budget. And if you like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe. I got all the hardware off. I am not replacing it because I love it. It's like a hammered metal, but I am gonna spray paint them all matte black. I love the way the handles turned out. You can really see that hammered texture. I'm really glad that I'm saving the hardware and just spray painting it. And I'm gonna screw them all back on the door fronts. I am just going to paint this portion of the cabinet. Number one reason, I hate painting shutters, but I just think it'll be nice to have the two different tones. We'll have the black, and then I'll keep the doors this color because it actually matches the trim really well. So I'm gonna empty this out and get it ready to paint. Okay, we're all ready. I'm using chalk paint. I have a homemade chalk paint that I absolutely love. It's affordable, and it'll adhere to any surface, so you don't have to do a whole lot of prep to any of your pieces that you're painting. So I've mixed up some black homemade chalk paint. I'll put the link down below in the description, so if you want to make that recipe, you can for yourself. And also, I picked this sweater up the other day, $4.99, American Eagle at Value Village. What do you think? First coat's dry, so I'm now putting on the second coat. That's one of the nice things about chalk paint, is it dries really quickly, so you can complete a project in a day and have 2 or 3 coats of that chalk paint dry for you. Okay, I got everything all painted and I absolutely love it. It took 2 coats of the chalk paint. It's dry. Now I'm going to put the doors on. I am absolutely in love with this cabinet, and what makes it even more fabulous is that it was free and it only took me a couple hours and a little bit of black chalk paint, and it looks fabulous. And I've just put some of my thrifted finds on top, a faux plant, a little pottery dish. I love looking for pottery at the thrift store, handmade. Nice little glass container, a little collection of some pottery and some battery operated candles that I think are fantastic to add some ambiance. Added a few vintage books And I've had these spindles in my collection for forever. I think they look nice just nestled in there. And did you know you can put art on your TV? If you go onto YouTube and search vintage art TV, they have so many fantastic channels. You can pick whatever vibe you want. Right now, winter, this would look beautiful. And it's gonna come up with a beautiful winter scene on your TV, and it's gonna alternate pictures every 10 or 15 minutes. They've got some beautiful floral ones. It's something just to play around with and see what looks nice in your setting. Next upcycle is this wicker stand, and I've had this for a long time, probably almost 2 years. I keep looking at it and not quite sure what to do with it, and I think I've been inspired. I've just kind of had this piece of wood on the top and this plant on it, but because the top is broken. So let's do this upcycle. Let's fix this up. This is what it looks like on the inside. I just had this piece of wood here because the wicker is broken and the inside and the top is broken on it, and it's covered in this quilted material, but it's stained, it's ripped, it's in really bad shape. You can just imagine how beautiful this was when it was brand new, and it's all the glue has come loose. It really needs some TLC. And then the bottom, I just stuck a basket in here, but it's been tucked away in my shed. It's really dusty, but somebody had just kind of decoupaged or stuck down this piece of paper, and it actually has a little drawer in it, and the drawer is also lined. It's got this pink tape on it, so it really needs to have some TLC. So let's get to work. Obviously, somebody maybe used this as an old sewing kit. There's a few little old buttons in the bottom. I'm trying to scrape out all the bits and pieces out of the top and the bottom here. So I squirted them with some hot soapy water. I'm gonna let them soak, and then I'm gonna scrape at it and see if I can get it down to the bare wood. Now with the top, this is all coming apart. So I think I'm gonna cut this inside piece out, and then I'll be left with the border, and then I think I can put it back on the top. I got the inside of that wicker all cleaned out. It was really broken and really fragile, but I was able to save it, and I think I'll be able to keep it on the top. Ultimately, I would love this to turn into a beautiful planter. I still got to clean out all the gunk and glue that's in here and on the bottom. I've got it cleaned up pretty good. I have no idea what kind of glue it was, but it was sticky. I love that natural wood on the bottom. The top is still got a lot of glue. I'm not sure if I'm gonna get much more out. And the drawer the same. It's got some really sticky glue. I'm gonna let it dry completely now, and then go back at it tomorrow when it's dry, and I might take the sander to the wood a little bit and see if I can get more of that glue out. Now there's a handle on this side, but it's missing on this side. You can see that it's pretty rough. I don't want to touch it too much because it's fragile, but I'm going to cut this one off, and I think I might incorporate it into the front. It's really easy to take off. It's just a little piece of wicker. Came off really easy, and I think it would look really nice if I maybe put it on the drawer or put it on the front here, and I'll just use my hot glue gun and put it on. It also needs a really good cleaning, so I've just got a soapy rag, and I'm just carefully just wiping off any dust or any dirt that it may have. Everything is dry. Now I cannot get a lot of this paint out of the top, but I don't think it's going to be an issue, because if I'm turning this into a planter, it almost might make like a waterproof barrier. But the bottom piece of wood came up really nice. I'm not going to touch it. The wicker is really fragile. I have to be really careful, because if I even bump into it, it's cracking and it's breaking off, as you can see right here. I lost a piece right here. So the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to seal it all up. I'm going to take this out into a well-ventilated area and give it a spray of my clear gloss over the entire piece. I know I had said that I was probably gonna just glue this little handle on here, but I found a little piece of copper wire. I think it blends in pretty good, and I'm just gonna use that and just attach it on the back. This turned out absolutely beautiful, and I'm mad at myself that I left it for as long as I did without upcycling it. It is fragile. It wouldn't stand up to any high use, but just to have it for a nice little plant stand, it's gonna work perfect. I wanted to show you sometimes when you find things at the thrift store, you don't actually need to upcycle it. You can just repurpose it. Now, I found this beautiful rocking chair. It's a little tiny one. Looks like somebody might have had a little puppy that was a little bit aggressive on some of the corners. Hopefully not a child, but probably a little puppy. And I'm just going to turn it into a plant stand. I paid $4.99 for it. And it's so beautiful, and just to put a potted plant on top of it, I think it's gonna be perfect. And I found the perfect spot for it, right beside our fireplace, snuggled in between Tina's little bed. Great way to repurpose a vintage rocking chair. Next upcycle is this wicker basket. It was $13.99, and I had a coupon for 20% off at Value Village, so great deal for a really big wicker basket. It's kind of dinged up along the bottom, and I'm not really loving the dark wood on the bottom, so I'm going to sand it up a little bit, clean it, and I'm going to put some white chalk paint along the base of this basket. I don't think this needs a lot. It's in really good shape. Other than the bottom has quite a few little dings and chips out of it, I'm going to paint it with my homemade white chalk paint, and I think that's all it needs. It's going to be a great catch-all for pillows and blankets. Okay, we got 2 coats on, and I think I'm just going to take my sanding block and just kind of roughen up around the edges. I think it'll blend in with this material better, but I thought this was a really great deal for $14.99, and I got lots of extra pillows and blankets that I can tuck away in this little basket, and it's going to look beautiful. This votive was from the thrift store, and it was from a previous project that I've done, and instead of letting it go to waste, I decided to repurpose it using a little piece of spindle that had already been painted. The spindle's color was actually really nice, so I just sanded it down a bit to give it more of a distressed look. Then I got out my trusty E6000 glue. This is an adhesive that works wonders on all sorts of DIY projects. I applied it to the bottom of the spindle, turned the votive upside down, and make sure that that spindle is in the center of the candle holder, set it aside, let it dry. It's that simple. Now this upcycled votive and spindle is a perfect addition to any corner of your home decor. It creates a really nice light when you put a votive in it, and these also make great gifts, so don't hesitate on spreading that upcycling love. An easy upcycling project that just required a little bit of creativity and some discarded items. I came across an old coffee canister that had seen better days. It was rusty and worn. However, I saw the potential in its unique appearance and decided to turn it into a planter. To add a little something extra, I paired it with a small metal container that I found at the thrift store and used some E6000 glue again to secure it to the two pieces. With just a little bit of effort, I transformed what was once destined for the dump into a charming new addition to any home decor. A lovely plant nestled inside this repurposed coffee canister would make a perfect addition to a coffee bar or a kitchen. Remember, upcycling doesn't have to be complicated. Sometimes it can be easy as breathing new life into forgotten treasures. The graphics on this old coffee canister are so beautiful, and it's rare to come across such unique designs these days. So I felt so fortunate to be able to find this, salvage it, and bring it back to life and incorporate it into my home decor. But I'm excited to show you how I'm going to upcycle mine and incorporate it into my craft room. Although the original finish on the spice rack was outdated, a quick fix with a scuff pad, which I've linked in the description below, to lightly sand the surface works perfect. This not only revealed a more modern looking color of wood, I just think that it also looks nicer than that dated orange stain. After wiping it down, I sealed it up with my engine enamel. This is really durable and will allow you to wipe it down or dust it after it's finished. And then I filled it up with a collection of my craft paints. Now I can easily see and access my paints. They're beautifully displayed in my craft room. And the spice bottles that were originally in the rack are the same size as these craft paint bottles. I have a bit of a mirror obsession. I just can't resist collecting them, but I love finding ways to upcycle them and give them a new life. This mirror caught my eye. It's a gold frame plastic one, but I saw potential in turning it into a rustic patina looking frame with just a little bit of acrylic and chalk paint. And my trusty stencil brush, I used homemade black chalk paint first as the base, just lightly dry brushing all over that mirror. It's important to make sure to get into all those little nooks and crannies for that authentic patina effect. After setting it aside and letting it dry, I then went back in and got my acrylic paint and used a turquoise color. I'm aiming to achieve an old rusted metal look for this project, and I've got a trick up my sleeve that's going to give it the perfect patina effect. By layering that turquoise on top of the black with a light hand, I'm dry brushing that turquoise over the frame, allowing the gold and the black to peek through, and it gives it a realistic weathered effect. When it's all finished, it's going to be hard to believe that this started out as a cheap plastic frame, and I absolutely love this transformation. I stumbled upon a real gem at the thrift store, a beautiful serving tray with a rattan border, but this dated stencil in the middle of it was not doing it any favors, so I decided to take matters into my own hands and revamp it completely. Firstly, I applied some paint stripper over the stencil in a well-ventilated area with my respirator mask on. And since the stencil seemed to be paint-based from probably the 70s or 80s, I was hopeful that that stripper would work its magic, and it did. After letting it sit for about 15 or 20 minutes, I scraped away at it, and the stencil started to come off. I repeated this process with a second coat of that paint stripper to ensure that I had every little bit of that stencil removed. After removing the label and that varnish completely, I decided to give it a really good wash with some soapy water, set it aside, and let it dry thoroughly. Once it was dry, I went back in with a 120 grit piece of sanding paper on my sander to remove any leftover little bits of varnish and stencil that might not have come off with that paint remover. With the surface now smooth and ready, I mixed up some instant coffee with hot water and applied it on the tray using a rag. This is a really great DIY stain. The result was perfect. It was a perfect match to the color of the rest of the tray. Once the coffee stain had completely dried, I sealed it up with some polyacrylic sealer, and we transformed this old dated thrift store tray into a stylish modern piece. It'll be perfect for serving drinks up on the patio this summer, or I can just display it on my table as a centerpiece. I was thrilled to stumble upon a Lazy Susan at the thrift store, and it was priced at only $4.99, which is a fantastic deal. Even though it was in rough shape with scratches and a really ugly stain, I knew that with a little bit of work, I could restore its natural beauty. So the best part was it was constructed from solid wood, which made it really perfect for upcycling. I used a palm sander with a 120 grit piece of sandpaper to remove the varnish and the stain from that Lazy Susan. I also took it apart and sanded every part until it was smooth. These are really expensive to buy brand new, so I'm really happy that I found it and I can upcycle it and make it look brand new again. Now I'm going to teach you how to make your own DIY stain using instant coffee. All you need is some hot water, a quarter cup of it, and 2 heaping tablespoons of instant coffee. Mix it all up to create a beautiful DIY stain that's going to make the wood on that Lazy Susan really stand out. To apply the stain, just take a rag and wipe that coffee mixture all over that wood until it's completely covered. The end result is so stunning. All of that grain in that wood just pops and it really enhances it. Not all DIY projects have to be challenging or require upcycling. Sometimes you can just simply bring a piece into your home, give it a good cleaning, and use it as is, or incorporate it into your existing decor. In this case of the Lazy Susan, all it needed was a little bit of surface work, a fresh coat of stain, and a sealant to bring out all of that natural beauty. After applying the coffee stain and allowing it to dry completely, I sealed it up with a matte finish polyacrylic sealer. The end result is stunning, and I couldn't wait to display it in my home. I placed it on my dining room table, and I'm using it to hold a plant, a candle, and my salt and pepper shakers. It's a perfect addition to my decor, and I can't believe I scored it for only $4.99. My little rocking chair, it was dusty and dirty, just needed a good cleaning, and it was outdated looking, and it didn't fit into my decor. However, I knew with just a few easy tweaks, I could get a fresh new look and make it blend into my space. This piece had 3 parts, including this glass votive, and I don't think it was supposed to go together. I'm going to save that for a future project. I focused on the little gold vase instead, giving it a coat of matte black spray paint. Once it was dry, I added some moss and a beautiful faux succulent to create a completely new piece of decor. I placed it on the rocking chair that I cleaned and dusted, and I love the way that it turned out. So much better, and it doesn't look dated anymore. Now I have a beautiful and modern piece of decor that's completely transformed from that 1980s vibe. It's a true testament to the power of simple DIY tweaks to take something old and make it look new again. I found a really beautiful cutting board at the thrift store for $5.99, and cutting boards can be really expensive. Although it was still in really good shape, it had a few scratches and stains, and I knew I could bring it back to life easily and quickly. First, I removed the hanger from the top so it wouldn't get in the way, and then I used my palm sander with a 20 grit sandpaper to make it nice and smooth. I don't think it was ever sealed, so I'm going to use my butcher block oil to make it food safe. It's easy to use, and all you have to do is rub it on the wood with a rag, wait a couple hours. I like to put on a second coat, and it'll be as good as new, ready to use in your kitchen. I'll put a link down below in the description to this product. Other products that you can use to seal a cutting board to make it food grade is mineral oil, or you can also use beeswax. These are commonly used to seal up cutting boards. It's important to avoid using regular cooking oils like vegetable or olive oil, as these can go rancid and potentially contaminate your food. Upcycle is this vintage basket that I found at the thrift store for $3.49. While the teddy bears in the basket are incredibly cute, the overall design was just really outdated, screaming early 2000s. However, the basket itself is in great condition and it has so much potential. I decided to strip everything down to the basket so I could use it for a new project. And as for the teddy bears, I couldn't bear to throw them away, so they're going to be donated along with the fabric pieces to the local thrift store. And I'm sure they're going to bring joy to another little owner. Do you remember when we used to dot letters with paint? Back in the early 2000s, this little heart had that technique done on it, but it can be upcycled and made beautiful again. With just a simple cleaning and some faux greenery, this old basket looks perfect again. But that's not all. Let me show you what I did with this little wooden heart that was on the inside. After sanding it down to reveal that natural wood grain, I just left a touch of that original white paint for that charming whitewashed effect. I sealed it all with some polyacrylic sealer. Store finds don't have to be left behind just because they look dated. With a little bit of imagination, you can upcycle them into some beautiful home decor that's going to blend in with your modern decor. So don't overlook those secondhand treasures. They might just be that missing piece that you're looking to add to your home. Across these unappealing votive, or I think they're called tart candle warmers at the thrift store, yet there's always potential for them to become something much more beautiful. With just a quick and easy coat of spray paint, these dated finds can be instantly updated. In this case, it simply was just some matte spray paint that transformed this into a versatile and chic addition to any home style. From traditional granny chic to boho, it's amazing how just a small touch-up can breathe new life into a thrift store treasure. Upcycling has never been any simpler, and I recently picked up this wooden bowl and a candlestick holder at the thrift store. We're going to merge these two together into a single piece in an effortless way to upcycle. The secret? Just a dab of E6000 glue or any other powerful adhesive that's going to permanently fuse these items together. All you need to do is place the bowl on a flat surface and position the candlestick holder in the center and ensure that it's perfectly aligned. Let it dry. And voila, in no time, this upcycle can be transformed into a chic little catch-all for jewelry, a perfect addition for you to hold some keys, or maybe a stylish kitchen accessory to keep ingredients handy while you cook. Possibilities are endless, and this DIY project is both speedy and uncomplicated. Let's try to upcycle one item a day for a more sustainable future. This candlestick, it was already black, but I want to make it even more spooky. And I had this pillar candle that I picked up at the dollar store. I'm going to incorporate that into this project. Now, if you want to create some faux rust, this is a great tip. Get some Mod Podge and just dab a little bit on wherever you think it would have naturally aged or naturally rusted. Just dab it on here and there. And then while it's still wet, you're going to take your cinnamon and you're going to sprinkle it right into that Mod Podge. And then you're going to set it aside and let it dry. Now we're going to customize a candle. I made my own napkin. This is a really neat technique. I have a full tutorial. If you haven't seen that, I'll put the link down below in the description. But you can basically make any of your own custom napkins. I printed this off on my LaserJet printer and we're going to add it onto that pillar candle. We're going to get some wax paper, and with the waxy side, we're going to wrap it really tightly around that candle, bunch it up at the back, and then we're going to use our heat gun and we're going to apply heat to that napkin and candle. And as the wax melts, that napkin is also going to melt right into that candle. If you don't have a heat gun, you can also use a hair dryer and just have it on the highest setting. You'll be able to tell when it's finished because the wax will have soaked right through to that napkin. Peel away the wax paper and you're left with a spooky graphic on your candle. I've made these candles before and I've had some people concerned about whether the napkin would catch fire as it burnt down. I've never had that issue, but here's a way to solve that. Burn the candle down until you can get a votive right in the top of it, and then you can just replace the votive and you'll never use up that candle also, and it'll last a long time. I've let the Mod Podge dry and I'm just wiping away any of that extra cinnamon, and as we do that, it's going to leave a really rusty look. Then I'm going to seal it up with some matte polyacrylic sealer. So we've taken that black plain candlestick and made it look rusty and old. I also had this mason jar lid and I am going to just use my Gorilla Glue and glue it on the top. And this is what I created. Next project is a scrap piece of wood that I've painted with some black and white homemade chalk paint and a bat that I found at a yard sale this summer. I really distressed both pieces with some 80 grit sandpaper, making it look old and spooky. And I'm going to take some of my green acrylic paint and I'm just going to flick it everywhere on top of that sign, just so it looks like it's chippy and old. I'm going to put a graphic on this using my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. Printed this off on my LaserJet printer, making sure to reverse the text, and we're going to use a Mod Podge mat. All of these graphics that I'm using today and any of these projects are available in my Etsy store, so you can head over there after the video and check them out. Putting a light coat over that whole piece of computer paper, going to center it where I want it on the sign, and then set it aside and let it dry for 24 hours. After the 24 hours, we're going to dampen it with a little bit of water, rub off all of that paper, and we're going to be left with a spooky graphic on our sign. Now I want it to go in those little drips of blood. I've taken my acrylic paint and I'm just painting on any of those drips with the red paint and just making it look like it's drippy and gory. I went through my stash and I found this old spring, not even sure what it was off of, but it's going to work perfect for this sign. I have these little staples. I'm going to put one on each end of the sign, and then I'm going to wire that spring on the top so it creates a really fun hanger for this sign. So here's our before, and here is what I created. Next project is another candle. I had both of these in my stash for a long time, but I knew I could transform them into something really spooky for Halloween. Gonna mix up some baking soda paint and apply it all over that candlestick holder. If you haven't never made baking soda paint, it works fantastic, creates really great texture. I'll put a link down below in the description so you can check it out. Once it's almost dry, I'm gonna roll it in mud. Just roll it so it gets in all those little nooks and crannies and push it right in so it looks grubby and dirty. And then I'm going to set it aside and let it dry. Now I'm going to go in with some gold metallic paint, some acrylic paint that I picked up at Michael's, and I'm just going to dab it here and there, almost like a dry brush, on any high areas where it was raised on the candlestick. Not adding very much, just a little bit here and there. Then I'm going to set it aside, let it dry completely, and then I'm going to seal it up with some matte clear polyacrylic sealer. I've put the taper candle in the candlestick holder, and now I've taken another votive and I'm lighting it. And what I'm going to do is, as everything is burning down and melting, I'm going to melt some more wax so it drips down that candle, so it gives that old, really antique look to that candle, as if it's burned forever and just dripped all over the place. And just be really careful doing this process. We don't want to burn ourselves or get any hot wax on us. And I'm just rotating the candle around so it's dripping everywhere. So here's our before, and here is what I created. This faux book that I found at the thrift store opens up, there's storage inside, and I have a fantastic idea of what I can do to turn it into some spooky Halloween decor. I put one coat of that black chalk paint over that entire book, and now I'm going to put on a coat of my white homemade chalk paint. I like layering up the colors because the black is going to peek through and make it look old and dirty and spooky when it's all finished. Now I went out into my garden and I just got some dirt, and I'm gonna rub it right into that dry chalk paint. It's gonna give it that really dirty look, like it's been a well-used book with dirty fingers all the time. You can use sand, you can use dirt, and just rub it right in aggressively until you feel you've got the color that you want. And you can see in the corners how it's picked up some of that dirt color, exactly what I wanted. I'm gonna add a bit more, and you can spray it with a little bit of water too if you want it to stick a bit. And now I'm going to take a toothbrush, and I've got some black acrylic paint and brown acrylic paint, and I'm just flicking it here and there on that book. And if you can't find one of these books at the thrift store, you can do this to an old book that's not usable anymore and it's missing pages and you want to upcycle it. You just won't have the storage on the inside. And I've got the perfect graphic that I designed for this project. I printed this off on my LaserJet printer, making sure to reverse the text. And if you like this graphic, it's going to be available in my Etsy store. I'll put the link down below in the description. We're using our Mod Podge mat, and we're going to put that liberally over that whole piece of paper. Now you can do this technique with an inkjet. I have lots of comparison techniques, so I'll also put those links down below and you can check that out also. I also wanted to put a graphic on the spine of the book, so I just used a portion of that graphic to do that also. Now I want to work on the pages of this book. I just took some acrylic brown paint, brushed it on, and then wiped it off with a paper towel, added a little black too, and I just think it gave it that touch of the pages. Now these graphics have sat overnight. We're just going to dampen them with a damp rag with some water until you can just start to see the graphics show through. And then we're going to rub off the paper, and we're going to be left with this spooky graphic on the front of this book. I use this technique a lot on my channel because it's so versatile and it's so affordable. All you need is some paper and some Mod Podge and some patience. So here we have our graphics on the book. I'm adding some more dirt so I can get some more aged look, and this is turning out fantastic. And I'm of course making a huge mess too as I'm doing this, but it's going to be worth it in the end. I'm going to seal everything up with some polyacrylic sealer, and we've taken this faux book from the thrift store and turned it into a fantastic piece of Halloween decor. And you can fill it up with candy or treats and have out to display on Halloween night. We're starting our first project by updating this old vase. It has a nice pattern, but I don't really care for the color, and the handle had been previously broken and fixed. So luckily I picked it up for $7.99 and it had an additional 50% off, so that was a really great deal. But we're going to add some texture to this using my homemade sand paint. If you have not painted with sand paint before, you need to give this a try. The texture is fabulous. I had this old tester that's almost like a cement color and some sand, and we're going to mix it all together. I have a full tutorial for this recipe. I'll put the link down below in the description, and you can watch that after you watch this video. So I'm just incorporating it all together, and then I'm just going to paint my entire vase. This adheres really well to any surface because the base of it is chalk paint, so you don't need to worry about it chipping or peeling off. Revamping thrift store finds that don't match your home decor is such a breeze with maybe just even a simple coat of paint or a color change. And it's amazing how you can give them a fresh new look and take something that's really dated and vintage looking into something that looks modern and fits your home decor better. As you can see, this homemade sand paint is already turning this vase into a beautiful piece that's not dated anymore. While we're waiting for that to dry, I picked up this candle for $1.99, and again, it was 50% off, and I have some of this paint left over, so I'm just going to paint it the same color that we did the vase. First coat's on. I'm going to set this aside and let it dry. To speed up the painting process, a heat gun on low setting can come in handy for drying the paint quickly before you add the second coat. As for the second coat of sand paint, I prefer to dab it on to create more texture, either by pouncing the brush or using a sponge. And now that the first coat on the vase is dry, I'll apply the second coat by pouncing that sand paint onto it. I stumbled upon the paint I used in this project in the Oops section at Home Depot. That's a great place to scout for affordable paint deals. It's always worth checking out. I sealed both of these projects with some spray polyacrylic sealer. And check out these transformations. They no longer look dated and they have more of a modern look that blends perfectly with my home decor. And best of all, I was able to accomplish this on a budget. This one is a really special project. I found this vintage light fixture without a base and I decided to turn it into a table lamp. Luckily, I found a base that had a light already in it and that globe fit perfectly on top. I just needed to find a way to make that light fixture sit on that base and not fall off and be a little bit permanent, but be able to still remove it if I needed to change the bulb. I was trying to figure out how to make it work, and I came up with the idea of using double-sided tape to hold that light fixture in place. I think it should work well enough because it's pretty secure even though it won't be permanent. I often come across these light fixtures at the thrift store and I'm always drawn to them because I love to upcycle them. I recently found another one and I turned it into a planter that I put a pothos in, and it's absolutely gorgeous. This is just double-sided tape that I found at the dollar store, and this is what it was like all put together. It's secure. I have that light bulb underneath and I can turn it on and it's going to be perfect right here in my little corner to light it up, and it gives little beams of light off of it when I turn it on in the dark. So I'm sure after you've watched this video and you go to the thrift store for your next trip, you're going to head right to the light fixtures and see if you can find something like this and recreate it. I'm guaranteed you'll look for something like that. Sprig of greenery also at the thrift store, but it had these cheap looking white flowers on it. Took them all off. It looked way better after they were done, but I still wanted to elevate it. So I got some of my white acrylic paint and I dry brushed the leaves, and it just kind of made them look more expensive and high end. I also found this handmade pottery vase that's just gorgeous, $3.49. So I added that sprig of greenery into it. That little bit of dusting of white acrylic paint on it made it look so it's not so faux, and it looked perfect. I fell in love with this pot as soon as I saw it. Handmade pottery. I seem to be drawn to all of these pottery pieces at the thrift store lately, and I am going to make a macrame hanger for this pot. After measuring out how much of the twine I needed, this twine I actually bought at the dollar store too, I've put it all together to make 3 strands. Now the wooden rings, if you are in the thrift store, have a look on the wall where they have all the little bags put together, because I found a full bag of these wooden rings. I think there might have been 12 in the bag for like $3.99, and I have been making macrame hangers with these for quite a while. I'm adding a piece at the top to secure that wooden ring on, trimming off the edges, and then we're going to do a little bit of macrame. If you don't know how to macrame, there's so many great tutorials on YouTube here that you can check out, but I'm just doing a couple really basic knots to put this together. Shopping secondhand before buying new is such a smart choice for several reasons. First and foremost, it's a great way to find unique items that you won't see in everyone else's home. You can discover vintage clothing, one-of-a-kind pieces, and even high-end designer items at a fraction of the cost. And secondhand shopping is also an eco-friendly option, as it helps reduce the amount of waste that ends up in our landfills. By purchasing items that have already been produced, you're preventing new resources from being used and reducing the demand for new items. Additionally, many secondhand shops donate a portion of their profits to charitable causes, so you're supporting a good cause when you shop secondhand. Okay, I've got my hanger almost finished. I'm just going to tie it now through those 3 holes that were already made in that ceramic pot to secure it really well. And then after I have them all tied, I'm going to gather it at the bottom of the pot and make a tassel. Despite all of my DIY experience, there's one thing that I've never tried before, and that's making pottery. It's been on my bucket list for a while now, and I'm really looking forward in the near future to take a pottery class and finally create some beautiful homemade pottery pieces of my own. I'm thrilled to finally hang this in our log home and put a little plant inside. It looks beautiful hanging in the window, and it just adds a little bit of greenery and nature to our space. I've come across numerous glass and ceramic vases at thrift stores that appear really outdated. Let me show you a few examples I found and how I plan to transform them doing some upcycling. First item I'm working on is this charming little piggy bank. It was absolutely adorable, but it had a logo on it from somebody that had probably went on a trip overseas. My initial step will be taking it outside and applying a coat of spray primer over that entire piggy bank. Once it was dry, I got out my napkins that had a really cute floral print on them that I picked up at the dollar store, and we're going to start decoupaging. I like tearing the paper into small pieces because it helps it blend in nicely when applying the decoupage technique. I'm going to be using Mod Podge matte for this. First, I'm going to apply just a thin layer on the piggy bank, and then I'm going to randomly stick that torn napkin all over the entire surface until it's completely covered. You can find plenty of adorable napkins at the dollar store. It's particularly useful to keep an eye out for seasonal ones and then add them to your collection. That way when you have a decoupage project like this, you'll have a variety of options that you can look through to find that special one-of-a-kind napkin that you can use. Or if you have a hard time finding a napkin that you like, you can always custom make your own. I love doing that, and I do it quite often. I have a full tutorial on how to make custom napkins. I'll put that link down below in the description. Look how adorable this little piggy bank turned out. It is completely dried now. I've sealed it with a polyacrylic sealer, and it's perfect for keeping my change in. It's such a cute little piece that no longer looks outdated or tacky with someone else's vacation memories. This candle holder has a really outdated look to it. If you're a fan of blue, it could be a great addition to your home decor, but since I don't have a lot of blue elements in my home, I decided to give it a makeover using some coffee paint. This incredible textured paint is perfect for revitalizing old items and giving them a modern touch. I mixed it with my own coffee grounds, and you can find a detailed tutorial on how to make this recipe on my channel. I'll provide the link to that down below in the description, and if you want to give it a try. Additionally, I also have a recipe booklet in my Etsy store that includes this particular recipe. To transform the candle holder, I started by applying a complete coat of that coffee paint and letting it dry thoroughly. Then I added a second coat to enhance that texture, patting it on. Finally, I sealed it with some polyacrylic sealer, and by doing so, we've turned this dated candle holder into a stunning modern piece that will perfectly blend into any decor due to its neutral color. For my next upcycling project, I had a small vase that had a souvenir label from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Often you can remove these labels or logos from vases with just some effort and the help of some sandpaper or a scuff pad. It may take some time and some effort, but if you persist, they will eventually come off. And I was thrilled because I really love the shape and the color of this vase. And I was delighted when I was able to manage to successfully remove and smooth out that tourist label from Myrtle Beach and give me an updated vase that I can add into my home decor. Like the piggy bank, which had an enamel paint likely baked right into the glass, this vase seems to have a stenciled design, making it easier to remove with some elbow grease. To complete the transformation, I applied some dark antiquing wax all over the vase, and I'm absolutely thrilled with the final result, and I'm glad I could upcycle it without it appearing tacky or resembling a vacation souvenir. Now let's see what we can do with this item. Once again, I really love the shape of it and the lid, but the graphics on it don't align with my personal style. It appears to have been maybe like a tobacco container or something similar, as the label seems to be that enamel paint again, so it's not going to sand off that easy. Therefore, I'm going to take it outside. I'm going to give it a really good coat of matte black spray paint, and I'm going to do the inside and the outside so it'll be completely covered. And then I'm going to let it dry before I go on to the next step. I didn't like that dated varnish on the lid, so I used some 120 grit sandpaper and I sanded it off. And after that, I sealed it with a polyacrylic sealer. Now let's get back to that jar. My goal is to give it an aged, worn pottery look, and to achieve this, I went out to my garden and I gathered up some dirt, and then I proceeded to rub that dirt into the spray painted surface, working it in and brushing off the extra as I went along. Finally, I applied a coat of Mod Podge matte. This technique is absolutely fantastic. And once I had it completely covered with the Mod Podge, I went back to that dirt, and then I'm just going to sprinkle it into that wet Mod Podge. Once completed, it transforms a plain pot or vase into something that resembles an old vintage ceramic piece from a bygone era and looks like it's been around for a century. You can achieve this effect with just a little bit of Mod Podge and just some dirt. I set it aside, let the Mod Podge dry completely, and then I went in and I just rubbed off any of that extra dirt, exposing little bits and pieces of that black underneath to give it even more of an aged look. When that was done, I went back with the Mod Podge matte again and sealed it all up. And that's it. The project's all finished, and I really loved how it turned out with that pottery-like aged look. It's definitely much better than it was when it had those tobacco graphics on it. Here's a set of 3 picture frames that I picked up at the thrift store. The frames are all painted with what feels like maybe an oil-based paint, and I'm going to make them nice and chippy and distressed looking. I picked them up for $5.99 a piece, and they were 50% off, so it's a really great deal. And let's get painting. I'm going to be using my homemade chalk paint recipe, and I've made it with some black paint, and I'm going to put a base coat on all 3 of those picture frames. I've taken the landscape picture out of the middle. It was just stapled in with little nails, so I removed those, and I'm going to paint all 3 frames. I'll put a link down below and up above here in the corner for my homemade chalk paint recipe. And it's really simple, and it adheres to any surface, so you don't need any prep or any sanding. And I'm also going to paint over all of these landscape print. These are just prints. They're not actual pictures. And now I've completed all pieces. Now when you're doing these frames, you don't want to use sandpaper or sand too much because it takes away the details. So I like using this packing tape, and I have a Scotch brand that works really well, and I'm going to use some of my candle wax to distress it also. The first thing you want to do is I'm using a pillar candle that I just cut in half so it's a little bit easier to manage, and I'm just going to rub it anywhere on the picture frame where I don't want paint to adhere. And I'm going to do it pretty aggressive because I want a really chippy, distressed look on these frames. And I like using these little candlesticks because it will get in the little corners where you can't with that pillar candle. And you're just going to rub it anywhere where it would naturally, if it had aged, had paint removed. It's really great for getting in these little corners, and it just gives it so much more of an authentic look when you can get in those little places. Whenever I'm out thrifting, I always seem to be drawn to these wooden picture frames, and I love being able to do these types of different painting techniques to just take them to the next level to make them look really nice in your home decor. I'm doing really neutral colors today, just black and white, but you could use some really funky colors and layer up this paint with this technique, and it would look fabulous. Now I've got my white homemade chalk paint, and I'm going to paint right over that black paint and right over that candle wax that I just rubbed on in all those little nooks and crannies on that frame. And again, this is the same recipe as what I made with the black paint. Really simple, easy to make, and a lot more affordable than buying the store-bought, and it works just as good for me. And I'm not using any sort of technique when I'm painting these frames. I just kind of slop it on sometimes because you just kind of want to have that age look to it. And if it has a little drip here and there or a little spot where you've missed, that just makes it look even better. Okay, I'll finish painting that first one, and you can see I've kind of not put paint in every little corner. Some I've left a little black peeking through, and I'm going to work away on these other two frames. And I'm also going to paint the middle pieces. I'm going to put a little bit of wax on them also, and then paint with the white chalk paint. And I'm going to use the packing tape now, and it just, when you put it on top of that white chalk paint with the wax underneath, when you press down that packing tape into that paint and then you tear it off, it will take little bits of the paint here and there and just give it that really cool kind of distressed look. Now I'm having a little bit of an issue today because it is really humid here, like really humid. It's almost 100 degrees and that tape is not sticking very well. So you're going to see me struggle a little bit, but it does work very well if the humidity is not high. I'm just taking my scraper and just pressing that packing tape right into that paint and getting it adhered to that wax. So when I pull it off, you're going to see it leaves an amazing texture on that paint. And like I said, if it wasn't so humid today, I would have probably a lot better results, but you'll see how well it works in the end if you just be patient and just kind of work away with this technique. Sometimes when you're doing these projects, it doesn't turn out exactly how you want it to because you can't control the weather, but I think it turned out really cool. And you can see some of the paint that it's pulled off on that packing tape and exposed a little bit of that black underneath, and it just gives it a really nice old look. I love using this technique on frames that are really ornate. You can't get into all those little corners with the sandpaper, and you don't want to because you don't want to sand down any of that detail of the frames. So using this, you don't destroy any of the wood, but you're still getting that distressed look. Let me know down in the comments if you've ever used this technique with the packing tape and how it worked out for you. Okay, I've finished up with the packing tape, and now to do a little bit more detail, I'm just going to take the side of my scraper and just lightly scrape away some of that white paint where there was any wax left that didn't come off with the packing tape. And again, that will leave a really cool kind of distressed look on the frame. And you don't want to apply too much pressure to scrape into that wooden frame. You're just trying to remove that top layer with the wax. And I'm just going to keep working away at it until I get to the desired look that I like. Now that I'm all finished using the packing tape and the little scraper, I'm going to take a Scotch pad and just lightly sand the whole frame, and that will take any rough edges away. It's not going to sand down much. It's just going to kind of give it a nice smooth finish. And I'm just going to work away on these other two frames. And I have the 3 frames all finished, and I'm really happy with the way they turned out. They look so chippy and distressed, but I haven't taken away any of that detail of the actual frame by sanding it down with any coarse sandpapers. I've just done it with the packing tape and with a scraper. Now I'm going to get the insides of the frames ready, and I'm going to scrape them down and distress them, and I'm going to use these really beautiful botanical prints that I got from the Graphic Fairy to put in the middle of them. To do these graphics, I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat and do my reverse graphic transfer method. I love using this, and I have lots of full tutorials on my channel. I'll put a link up above here and down below if you'd like to try it out, so you can have a full detailed tutorial step by step. My frames and my prints are all finished, and I like to seal everything with a water-based polyacrylic sealer, and it just makes everything pop also when you put this on top. It brings out the little distressed edges and seals it really well for dusting. And I'm loving the way these turned out, and I'm obsessed with these botanical prints. I think they look fabulous with these distressed frames. So if you're out thrifting and you find some frames or you have some in your stash, give this technique a try because it works fantastic. The 3 frames that I'm going to work on, they're quite ornate, and I'm going to try to bring some of that out with some different colors and some different painting techniques. And they're kind of dirty. I've had them stored in my shed since the summertime. So I'm going to take a wipe and wipe them down really nice and clean and then get started painting them. This is the first frame that I'm going to work on. I think all of these frames I picked up at a yard sale. I don't think I paid over $1 for any of them. But what I'm going to do with this one first is I'm going to put a coat of my black chalk paint all over the frame and all over my piece of MDF board that fits in the frame. So I'm going to work away on that. My coat of black chalk paint has completely dried, and now I'm going to put a coat of white chalk paint as the top base before I put my graphics on it. So I'll probably put 2 coats of the white on there. Now the reason I put the black on is when I distress it and sand it a little bit before I finish it, I like the black to kind of peek through and give it that antique old feel. That's just my preference. You don't have to put that layer of black on when you're making signs. I just think it makes it look a little bit extra old. And I'm just going to work away and put 2 coats of the white chalk paint on top of this. I'm going to use the candle wax method on this frame. I love this method. This is just a pillar candle from the dollar store that I've cut a piece off of, and you just want to take it, and I like to be really aggressive. Just kind of rub it all along the frame wherever you think it would naturally wear, and wherever you put the wax, your paint is not going to adhere in those spots. So it's going to make it look rustic and chippy. So I'm just going to put a whole bunch on here. I want it all in that ornate part, so that will all show through. And you can see I didn't put the black paint everywhere. I kind of left some of the gold peeking through because I want that to show when I sand it all down also. So now that I've got the candle wax on, I'm going to put a coat of my white chalk paint over the whole frame. Okay, my layer of white chalk paint has completely dried, and I kind of like the look of it. It kind of had the stain leach through it a little bit. It's got a really rustic look now. I'm going to, my trick when I'm doing the candle wax technique is to use the heat gun now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up that wax that's underneath that white chalk paint. And then I'm going to take a scraper and I'm going to scrape away, and wherever there's wax, it's going to lift off that paint on the top and leave it nice and chippy and rustic looking. So I'm going to work away on that. Now you can see when I'm scraping, I don't scrape this way, I scrape away and just very lightly. And as you're doing it, you can see that it pulls up all those different colors underneath. There's not really any right or wrong way. You just keep kind of doing it until you like the look of it. And put your picture in it. Okay, this frame is all done, and that's how easy you can create a plain wooden frame into something farmhouse, chippy, and rustic. I'm going to seal this now with a satin-based polyacrylic sealer. Make sure you're using water-based. If you're not using water-based, you're using an oil base, it will yellow on you very quickly over time. So I'm going to put a nice coat over all of it, seal it up. This part's finished, and now I'm going to work away on putting my graphic on the MDF board for the middle. This is the graphics that I have designed, and these are available in my Etsy store. If you want to purchase these after, I'll have the link to all 3 of the graphics in the description. And so I've done this on my LaserJet printer I've made sure to reverse the text. If you're buying them out of my Etsy store, they're already reversed. You don't need to worry about it. And I'm going to use my Mod Podge mat to do the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer on this sign. I love the way that it turns out, and it's so easy to do once you get the hang of it. When you're doing this technique, you just need to put a light coat on. You don't need very much. You just need just enough to cover all of the graphics, and make sure you go right out to the edge of the paper. That will give you the best results. And just cover your whole piece of paper. I've got this completely coated. I'm going to flip it over, make sure it's centered exactly where I want it. And then I'm just going to rub out any bubbles or wrinkles. And then you're just going to set it aside, and I'm going to let it sit until tomorrow before I take the paper off. This one has sat overnight. I just have a little dish of warm water with a little rag in it, and you just want to dampen it just so you can start to see the graphics come through, and then you're going to rub off all of the paper. I've got all the paper rubbed off this graphic, and now I'm just going to put a coat of my polyacrylic sealer on the top to seal it up really nice. I love the way this frame turned out with the candle wax distressing and then scraping it off. It looks perfect, and a perfect graphic to add into it. Next frame that we're going to work on is this one. I think I am going to just leave this one gold and black. I'm not going to put any white on top of it. And I'm going to do the candle wax technique again. I'm going to put the candle wax right on this frame right now, and then put the black on top of it. The black's all dry. What I'm going to do next creates an amazing finish, and it's done with packing tape. You just take a piece of packing tape and you press it right into that frame, into all of those grooves. Press it down really well, and then when you peel away, you're going to peel away little bits of paint here and there, so it looks like it's kind of worn off. And I love that look. So I'm going to do that over the whole frame. I'm going to do a little spot here to show you on the ends what it looks like. You're just going to really press it right in there, and then just find the end, peel it off, and that's what you're left with. This technique is so easy to do, no mess. Anywhere where there was a little bit of wax, the tape will peel it off. And anywhere where there's little bits of paint that haven't adhered very well, the tape will peel it off. And you can use the tape more than once. You can kind of use it a couple times, and then it'll take less off when it's less sticky and more off when it's more sticky. You just kind of play around with it, but I love the effect that it gives. This one's all done. I'm going to seal it up with some polyacrylic sealer, and then I'm going to work on the middle piece of MDF board to put the sign on next. I'm now going to do the center board for this frame. I've pulled a lot of gold out in it, so I had some gold acrylic. I think that's what I'm going to do as my base on this one. Do some maybe gold, some black, and then finish it off with a light coat of white. Okay, I changed my mind. I had thought maybe I was going to put some black, some gold, and some white. And then once I finished the gold and I put the frame up with it, I love it. So I'm going to do my graphics right on top of this gold and do the Mod Podge reverse transfer method. So I'm going to get my graphics printed off right now and get them on this board. I've got the next graphic printed off. This has got a lot of farmhouse feel. I love this one. Also available in my Etsy store if you're interested. I've had to print it out on 2 sheets of paper. I have a video on how you can size your graphics if they're bigger than a sheet of paper. I'll put a link down below in the description. for how to do that. And it's really simple and really easy to do. So now I'm just going to cut this out, place it where I want it, and put on the Mod Podge for the reverse transfer method. I've got it all on. All the bubbles and wrinkles are pushed out, and I'm going to set it aside till tomorrow, and then we'll finish it off. Okay, now this one is set for 24 hours. This is the one that I did with the gold background. I'm just going to take my damp cloth and just put the water on it until you can start to see the graphics, and then we're going to rub away. Okay, I've got all the paper rubbed off on this. Sometimes when you're doing this technique, you can find that you might get a little bit of a white haze, especially if you're doing it on a darker background. I usually, when I'm doing this technique, I like to do it on a white background, but I kind of liked the gold with this frame. So what I do if I have a little bit of a white haze that I can't rub off, I will just take the paint that I was using and a little paintbrush and just kind of paint over those little areas, and it'll all blend in and look really nice. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I've taken all that little white bits of cloudiness away, and if you still see a little tiny bit, you don't have to worry. When you put a coat of the polyacrylic sealer on, it will seal everything all up, and a lot of that will go away. So I'm just going to put a really good coat of polyacrylic sealer on this. I'm so happy I chose the gold background on this. It looks fantastic with the gold accents in the frame. I just love the way that it turned out, and I love this graphic. On to the next one. Third frame. I think I kind of want to keep it the wooden color, and it looks like it's had maybe some plaster or something that has been kind of pushed in to these grooves. I'm going to give it a light sanding, bring that all up, get rid of some of this reddish color, just basically clean it up, and then I'm going to coat it with some polyacrylic sealer to seal it all up. I'm just using a 80 grit sanding block, and I've got some finer, I think this might be 120, and I'm just kind of working away on it, and you can see how this is really red, and it's got like a gold tinge to it. What I've done is I've sanded this right down, and it's got rid of all of that gold, which I like much better, and I'm sanding down some of that reddish tinge, and I'm really liking it. A little bit of work, but it's going to be worth it. I got it all done. I got a coat of the polyacrylic sealer on it. It's not perfect. I didn't get a lot of the red out, but it certainly looks better from when I started. And now I'm going to paint the inside MDF. I've just squirted on some of my acrylic paint in burnt umber. I'm going to do that as a base coat, and then I'm going to put a couple coats of the white chalk paint on top of it. So when I kind of sand it down a little bit, this brown will peek through, and then I'll have the white top. So we're going to get busy. Okay, I've been struggling to try to get a nice color that I like on this MDF board that's going to go in this frame. And I didn't like the stark white. I tried to do some kind of dabbing of different colors, and I wasn't really feeling it. And then I thought the color of the frame is almost like a cinnamon color, and that's what I'm trying to get, a light cinnamon color. I grabbed my cinnamon, and I'm just going to rub it into that MDF board and see what that looks like as a base before I put my graphics on. Sometimes you just have to play around with different techniques and different, just try different things, and sometimes you're surprised with how it turns out. And I kind of really like the color that this is turning. I'm just rubbing it into the paint. Isn't quite dry. It's still a little bit damp. So that gives the cinnamon something to kind of stick to. I'm just kind of rubbing it all over. And then I'll brush off the extra cinnamon that's not staying on. And we'll be ready to put a graphic on it. And I think that will give me the color that I'm gonna like. Okay, I really like it. It gives it a really kind of aged antique look. Perfect base for my graphics. And you can put your graphics right on top of this. There's hardly any cinnamon left on this paint. It's just kind of worn right into it. So when we're doing the transfer technique, it won't rub off the cinnamon. It'll work perfect. So next step, graphics. I printed my graphics all off, the same as all the other times on my LaserJet printer. This is the graphic that I'm going to use, but we have to reverse it. So I've sized it because this is bigger than a sheet of paper. I have the tutorial. I'll put that down below so you can figure out how to make your graphics bigger. And we're going to use the Mod Podge mat and put it on the MDF board. Okay, now we're going to work on the last one where I did the background with a little bit of that cinnamon color. I'm just going to take my damp rag and just dampen it until I can start to see the graphics show through. And then we're going to rub off all of that paper. I've got all the paper rubbed off of this. Gonna put a nice coat of polyacrylic sealer on the top, and then we're ready to put it in the frame. Adding the cinnamon into that paint gave it that extra special touch that it needed. And I love that I just kept the frame kind of natural and just sanded it down a little bit. I love it. I'm really happy with the way all three of these frames turned out. And like I said before, I've probably paid $1 for each frame, and I had some scrap MDF that I cut to size to fit the frames. So they are really affordable to make. Sometimes I get the best results, just trial and error, trying out different things, and they turn out in the end exactly how I want them to. Who would have thought that cinnamon would take this picture to the next level? I think it looks fantastic. Okay, we're ready to start this project. I'm not sure about the frame. I might add another color on top once I get it all finished and I do my dried flowers and see what kind of colors pull out. I might put another coat on this, but for now I'm just going to set that aside, and we're going to work on the graphics on this. So this was the inside of the frame. It's just the backer, and what I did was I put one coat of black chalk paint and then 2 coats of white chalk paint, and we're ready to put the graphic on. And now I've printed my graphics off. I made my graphics and then I've printed them off on my LaserJet printer, and you have to make sure that you reverse your text. I just printed this off just to show you the quote that I made. And in a field of roses, she is a wildflower. And I thought that was appropriate when I'm going to add all my dried flowers all along the bottom. And I printed it off on my LaserJet printer, reversed the text, and I sized it to the size that I wanted for this piece of wood. And we're all ready to put it on with the Mod Podge. I'm just going to cut it down to size so it fits better on the piece of wood. And I have a tutorial where I show you how I do my graphics and print them off on my Word program and reverse the text. I'll put a link up above here and down below in the description. So if you're unsure how to do that, you can go back and you can check that out. To do the Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer, I'm using the Mod Podge mat. I have a full tutorial start to finish that's really good to do a full-size sign if you want to check that out. But today I'm just kind of doing a fast version of it. You're just going to put a light coat over the whole graphic and then put it on the piece of wood and let it set overnight. And then when it's finished, you're going to take a damp rag and then rub off the graphics. Okay, I have the graphics all on. I'm just rubbing out any wrinkles or bubbles. It's all good. I'm just going to set this aside, let it dry thoroughly. I usually leave it overnight, and then we'll be ready to rub the paper off and we'll have a beautiful graphic. Okay, this is completely dry, and now we're going to take a little damp rag and we're just going to dampen the paper just until you start to see the graphic show through. And I like to do it in sections. So I'm going to do this section first and work away at it, and you just rub it until all the paper comes off. And you just kind of go gently and just get the feel for it. And it takes a little bit of a knack and a little bit of patience, but it works perfect. And as you can see, as you work away, all that paper rubs off and then the graphic is left on your project. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. I have the graphics all done, and now we're ready to use the dried flowers that I pressed from my garden and some wildflowers that I found out and around my house. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of lay them out, see how I like them, and then I'm going to Mod Podge them onto my piece of wood. So it'll all be incorporated into one, and the frame will then go on when it's all finished. So I'm just going to work away on these dried flowers and see how I like them. I have them kind of set where I think I want to put them. So I'm just going to take my time and just Mod Podge them onto that board, and I'll probably fiddle with it a bit, but I am loving the way that it's going to look and all the colors of those flowers. So I'm going to get my Mod Podge out. I have this set up so I have the base of the dried flowers of how I want them. I'm using my Mod Podge mat, and there's not really a real special technique to this. You just want to, now these are really brittle from when I dry them. I'm going to put a little bit on the back, just gently, because you don't want to break any leaves off. Just kind of pat it on. And then flip it over and kind of just place it where you want it. And then just gently, just take your paintbrush and just add the Mod Podge. Make sure you have a real good coat on it so it's going to stay put. And then we're just going to just do section by section and layer it on. After seeing all the colors of the dried flowers come together, I think I want to make a little pop of color on the frame. So I am going to use my baby wipes, and I've got some pink acrylic paint, and I'm just going to dry brush just on top of it. because then I'll have like all three of these colors popping through. I'm gonna have some pink, I'm gonna have some black, I'm gonna have some gray, and I think that'll really complement the wildflowers and the pressed flowers that I have on the picture. So I'm gonna work away at that. And I think that was a really good idea to add a little splash of pink to the frame. I think it's going to look really good with all those dried flowers in that graphic. And I'm ready to put this into the back of the frame. It's all dry. Loving the pink. That was an amazing choice to do that. So I'm just going to put this in and then use my hot glue gun just to secure it back into the frame. I have a collection of some dried flowers, some faux flowers, and I think I'm just going to nestle them in between. It'll give it kind of more of a 3D look, and it might brighten it up a little bit because I find some of the dried flowers, when I dried them, they kind of went a little bit darker. That's why I added a little bit of the acrylic paint to make the colors pop a bit, and I think this will finish it off really well. I'm just going to use hot glue from my hot glue gun and just kind of place them where I think it's going to look the best. And all finished, and that little splash of those artificial and faux flowers finished it off beautiful, and I love it. It's so whimsical and so bright, and I think it would look perfect in a little girl's room. This graphic is available in my Etsy store. If you'd like to purchase it, make sure you use the code SAVE50 and you can try a project like this yourself. So go outside and gather up some wildflowers and some flowers from your garden and give this a try. First project is this little mirror that I picked up at the thrift store. I think it probably originally came from the dollar store. It was 50 cents. I picked it up. I'm going to turn it into some boho beautiful decor. I took the mirror out and I'm going to use some macrame cord. I had some cord left over from a project and it wasn't enough to do another hanger, so I'm going to use it on this thrift flip. I'm going to cut a whole bunch of pieces the same length because we're going to do a lark's head knot all around the outside of that frame. Now that I've gotten them cut all to the length that I want, we're just going to start putting those all around that little plastic frame. These were made quite cheap from the dollar store, and by adding this fringe on it, it's going to really make it look high-end, and it's really simple to do. Might take 15 or 20 minutes to put together. And if you don't have any macrame cord, you can use twine, you can use yarn, you can use cut up fabric, just use your imagination. If you want to use some macrame cord, I'll put a link down below in the description for my favorite. I've got them all tied on around the whole outside of that plastic frame. Now we're going to unravel all those ends so they can be nice and full. Grab a coffee or a tea and work away at this. I actually find it quite relaxing. I'm going to now just take my comb and brush it all out, and then we're going to take our scissors and we're going to cut all around the outside to make sure that it's all the same length. I'm just using my ruler here to use as I cut along, so I'm making sure that it's going to be all even. And make sure you have a really sharp pair of scissors. These ones aren't probably the sharpest. If you had a rotary cutter, that would probably work really perfect too, and you could do it right on a cutting board. Now we're ready to glue that mirror onto the back of that frame just with some hot glue, and it is beautiful. It looks so much better than that 50-cent mirror that I picked up at the thrift store. It now looks like a beautiful high-end piece of decor. Next project, I went to my recycling bin and I grabbed an empty egg carton, and we're going to do something really beautiful with these. You've probably all seen these before. Did you know that you can make flowers out of these egg cartons, and they look so beautiful when they're all done? I'm just going to cut these into each individual little egg cups, and then we're ready to start our project. I've got them all trimmed around the edges, and now I'm just going to cut in each corner right down to the flat of the egg carton. It's going to take quite a few of them, so just work away and make sure you have really sharp scissors. Okay, I've got them all cut and we're ready to put them together. You're going to take your hot glue gun and put a little bit of hot glue right in the center, and then you're going to take another one and just kind of mold it a little bit and then put it so it's off-centered to the one below it, so it looks like petals. You don't want them stacked up so the petals are together, you want them off-centered. Now we're going to cut a strip off the top of that egg carton and we're just going to roll it into a cylinder. Once you have it rolled together, put a little bit of hot glue in the bottom of that flower and then put your cylinder in there and you have a beautiful egg carton flower. So I'm just going to work away at putting all of these together so I have enough to go completely around my project. And once they're all done, these are really tricky to paint. I'm going to put them in the top of that eggshell container. I'm going to take them outside and spray paint them with some black spray paint. And I picked up another one of those mirrors from the dollar store that were at the thrift store that I picked up for 50 cents. And we're just going to glue those flowers all around the outside of that mirror. If you wanted to do different colors, you could take the mirror out of the frame, spray paint that round plastic part, and then spray paint your flowers so they would all match. The black fits my decor for where I want to put it, so I left it all black. And look how that took that plain ordinary mirror to the next level with those beautiful egg carton flowers. I love picking up vintage frames, yard sales, garage sales, thrift stores. Always pick them up, always have way too many. Had this in my stash and I'm going to turn it into a beautiful sign. I want to change the color of the frame a little bit. It didn't have a back, so I cut a piece of wood to fit into the back. And I'm going to incorporate this old horseshoe that I found. It's seen better days, but it's going to look beautiful when it's all finished on this sign. Everything's going to get a coat of my black homemade chalk paint, so I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. Everything's got a coat of black. I didn't completely cover it. I wanted a little bit of that white to peek through. And my piece of wood that I cut for the center, I'm going to put a coat of white chalk paint on that, set it aside. But the frame, we're going to get working on doing some fantastic distressing. I always get so excited when I have a project like this and I can start layering up colors and painting techniques, and excited about what it's going to turn out like. I've got a couple different colors. I've got a yellow and I've got a rust color. I used this on another sign that I made last week. I loved it. So I'm going to use these colors again, and I'm just going to kind of hit and miss. I don't have to cover it completely. Just here and there. And then when this color is dry, then I'll do the same thing with the yellow paint. That color's all dry. Now we're going to just splash on a little bit of this yellow. We've got all those colors all layered on, and now we're going to use hairspray. If you didn't see my tutorial on how to distress wood using hairspray, I'll put the link down below in the description. Works fantastic, and it creates a beautiful crackle finish. What you want to do is you want to spray your hairspray over the entire frame and give it a really good thick coat. And then once you have it all covered, you want to let it dry completely. Our hairspray is completely dry. Now I find this technique works best with acrylic paint on top. So I've got some white acrylic paint, and you just want to do long strokes. You don't want to put too many back and forth motions in it because we're trying to get a really nice crackle finish. And if you work it too much, you won't get the crackles showing up. So I'm just gonna do long strokes over the whole frame until it's completely covered. And you can miss spots here and there because this is all about having a rustic finish. And I also find that this process works better if you use a heat gun to now dry that paint. If it dries faster, the crackles come out better. So I'm just gonna put my heat gun on a low setting. You don't wanna hold it too close, and just dry. And as you dry, those crackles will appear. And look at the crackle that hairspray made. I just love using that, and it just makes everything look very authentic. I'm gonna distress it a little bit more. I have a squirt bottle, just some water in it, and I have a stiff stencil brush. I'm just gonna spray the water on the high areas and then just wipe away with the stiff brush, and it just takes away that really stark painted edge and makes it look a little bit more worn. So I'm just gonna work away on that. And after I've wiped off the area with my brush, I just like to take the sandpaper. This is just, I think it might be a 80 grit, and just lightly kind of just touch it on the high areas. I've got it the way I like it. I've just got a rag. I'm just gonna wipe it all down, dry it really well, and then I'm gonna seal it with my polyacrylic sealer. I designed this graphic. I'm going to use my Mod Podge reverse graphic transfer method. Live like someone left the gate open. I think that's really appropriate with the horseshoe, and I'm going to apply it onto the base of the frame. My graphic has sat, it's all dry. I'm going to take a damp rag and just dampen it so you can start to see the letters show through, and then start rubbing off the paper. Got everything all coated in polyacrylic sealer, the frame and the sign. And now I'm just going to adhere my horseshoe onto this with some E6000 hot glue, and it's going to be all finished. I love it. I love the way that this turned out, and that painting technique really perked up that frame. The little horseshoe, that was something that somebody probably threw out and didn't think there was any potential to it. And I thought it would look perfect with this quote. Next thing that I'm going to work on is these frames. I'm going to take the backing out and spruce up the frames. I picked these up at the thrift store for $4.99, and they were 50% off. So I thought that was a really good deal for some really good solid wood frames. And they just have staples in the back, just using my pliers. And I'm just gonna pull it out. I have them all taken apart, and actually the prints in them were little cards. They're kind of sun faded, but I kind of like them. I'm not gonna put them back in these because that's not kind of the style that I'm going for with these frames, but I'm gonna tuck these aside because I'm gonna use them for another project. Okay, now we're gonna work on the frames. I wanna keep this the color that it is. So I've got some painter's tape. I'm going to tape it off so I don't get any paint on it. And then we're going to do a distressed finish on the rest of the frame. We're going to use the candle wax technique. If you've watched my channel for a while, you know that I love doing this to create chippy layered wood. And I like being really aggressive with it because I love that chippy look on all of my projects. I know it's not for everyone, and you don't have to do this step. You can just, if you're redoing frames, you can just paint them just a plain color, but I like to add a little bit of jazz to it. I've got all the wax on, and now I'm going to put a coat of the black chalk paint over the whole frame. And wherever there's a little bit of wax, that paint is not going to stick there. So you're going to get that layered look of that paint color underneath. The coated black is all dry. I'm going to use another coat of wax. Just going to kind of put it everywhere. And then I'm going to put a coat of white chalk paint on. These are all dry. We're going to use our packing tape to create the chippy layered look on this. We're having a snowstorm here. I don't want to take these outside to my shed and sand them. So when you use this technique, you don't have to use the sander at all. No mess. It's really easy and it creates a fantastic finish. I've put the layers of wax on it. What I like to do, I like to heat it up a little bit with my heat gun so the wax kind of gets a little bit melted before we put on our packing tape. This is seriously so easy. You just get a piece of packing tape and you rub it right into the wood, and then you just take a corner of it and peel it. And as you do, you are left with a fantastic layered chippy look. Isn't that fantastic? So I'm going to work away on both of these frames. If you like this kind of look, you have to try this on some frames because it just works fantastic. Look at the chippy layered look that it gives. Okay, let's finish these off. You don't always have to do a transfer method or decoupage. You can just print off really great graphics and put them in a picture frame with glass. That's what I'm going to do with these. I designed these two graphics last week, and that's what I'm going to put in these frames. I'm just going to cut them to fit, and I think they're going to look fabulous with this rustic kind of frame. And we're just going to pull off the tape. I love that. I love the contrast of all the different colors. And they're all done. I love them, and I have a spot in my kitchen. I'm going to keep these ones for myself. I'm now going to work away on this ornate tray. I love the details in it, but I think I'm going to be able to make these details pop a little bit more. I'm going to use some wax. It's just an old pillar candle, and I'm just going to go along the edges a little bit so when I put the paint on, it won't adhere to wherever there's some wax. I'm going to put on a coat of acrylic metallic paint. This one is in spun gold. I've got 2 coats of gold on this and the candle wax underneath it, and I'm going to put another coat of the candle wax on top of this gold before I put on my last coat. Okay, and now I've got some baking soda paint mixed up, and I'm just going to put a coat all over it, just kind of slop it on. This is kind of a watery mixture of the paint, but that's okay. I didn't want it to be on thick. I wanted it to go on really thin because I'm trying to get a really aged kind of look on this tray. Everything is completely dry. I'm going to take my sanding block and just give it a light sanding, and anywhere that there was wax, that paint is going to come off and it leaves a fantastic rustic look. And I'm bringing up that gold and that black. Okay, I have this all finished and distressed, and I'm going to do a fun technique with this. I'm going to make these raised edges kind of look antique and rusty, and I'm going to do it with cinnamon and Mod Podge. Now I just put a little bit of the cinnamon in just a plastic dish, and I've got Mod Podge matte You can also use school glue. That works fine too. And I'm just going to take a little paintbrush and just kind of rub it along wherever there's high spots. I want that Mod Podge just to stick on those places. I don't want it to be all over the whole project. So I'm just kind of, just lightly, just kind of brushing it on. I want it to give it a rusty antique look. I'm going to put some in the corners here and here. And then before it dries, you don't want it to dry because the cinnamon won't stick to it. I'm going to sprinkle the cinnamon on it, and it's going to give it a really neat aged look. I'm just going to get some underneath here. Okay, and then I'm just going to take a little pinch and just sprinkle it all over. I got all the cinnamon all sprinkled on, and now I'm just going to let it sit and dry. It's completely dry, and I'm just going to take an old paintbrush and just kind of wipe away any of that's still laying on top, and it leaves it looking nice and old and rusty. I added a little bit more Mod Podge and cinnamon. I wanted it to look a little bit more rusty, and I'm really happy with the way that it's turned out now. And now I'm going to put a graphic in the middle. This is the graphic that I'm going to use, Smile, Sparkle, Shine. This is just printed off on my LaserJet printer. If you've been following along, you know that I love my reverse Mod Podge transfer technique. That's what I'm going to do on this. And I'm just going to cut this out to fit my project, and then use my Mod Podge mat to place it on the tray. My tray is all dry. It's sat overnight, and now I'm ready to rub the graphic off on it. And this is all ready to seal with a polyacrylic sealer. All finished. And if you haven't tried that little trick to use cinnamon to make it look like it's rusty and old, give it a try because it works perfect. Finding lamps at the thrift store is pretty easy, but many of them look really outdated. Still, I love getting them at a great price and giving them a fresh new look through upcycling. I recently found this plain lamp, and I wanted to transform it into a natural boho piece. To kickstart the process, I started masking off the cord and the light bulb area. Buying secondhand items from the thrift store is not only a great way to live sustainably, but it also reduces the demand for new products, saving resources and energy used in manufacturing. It's like giving the environment a high five while finding cool stuff. I finished masking off everything, and I'm super excited about the baking soda paint I've mixed up. It has this amazing texture that resembles ceramic or stone. All you have to do is dab it on up and down to create that extra texture. Making baking soda paint is a breeze, and I have a tutorial for you. I'll put that link down below in the description. Once the first coat of baking soda paint had completely dried, I wasn't quite satisfied with that stark white color. So I grabbed my acrylic paint and I found a gorgeous off-white shade. Just like before, I'm dabbing it on. The best part, that since we have that textured baking soda paint underneath, the acrylic paint also takes on that textured look. After applying one full coat, I decided to add some coffee grounds for even more texture. I simply dabbed the dry coffee grounds from the leftover coffee this morning that I let dry into the wet acrylic paint. It gives a subtle aged appearance that I'm aiming for with this piece. Remember to dab up and down to maintain that desired texture using this painting technique. Once everything had completely dried, I need to seal it up with a water-based polyacrylic sealer just to add that extra protection. Now it's time to shift our focus to the lampshade and make it equally as fabulous. I have a whole stash of ribbons and I picked one that matches a lampshade beautifully. With my handy hot glue gun, I'm simply attaching it along the base of the lampshade. It creates a really nice ruffled look that instantly elevates this lamp. It's amazing how a little paint and a touch of ribbon can transform an old lamp into something fabulous. Next time you visit the thrift store, make a beeline to the lamp section. Take a peek and see if there's anything waiting to be upcycled. Trust me, it's a breeze and you can quickly update a lamp to match your style or your home decor without breaking the bank. Why spend on something new when you can give new life to an old treasure? This upcycling project is an absolute delight and anyone can do it. Give it a shot and enjoy the satisfaction of creating something unique and fabulous from the thrift store. Thrift store frames are everywhere and they come in all sorts of styles. Here's a super easy way to upcycle them. Find a frame that has a really ornate design. Then get creative, print your own picture or use a page from a book or a magazine. Pop it into the frame and boom, you have instant art. I did this myself with a map I sell on Etsy. I printed it out, crinkled it up, added some coffee stain for that old vintage look, and it's so simple yet it turns out so amazing. You can totally do this and have your own unique artwork in no time. Coffee staining paper is a breeze. It transforms a plain white image into something vintage, unique, and full of character. Here's how. Mix instant coffee with warm water and spread it all over your print or design. And then grab a heat gun to dry it, giving that old aged appearance. It's simple and a fun way to add a touch of nostalgia to your artwork. Give it a try and watch your creations come to life with a charming vintage vibe. After giving the glass a really good cleaning, I'm ready to complete this. Simply add the map to the frame, put the back on, and voila, you've created a stunning artwork using beautiful thrift store frames at a fraction of the cost compared to buying them from a department store. I found the frame didn't even need it to be painted. I love the gold and the dark wood colors, and the map complements it perfectly. This successful upcycle proves that you don't have to look far to find treasures. Next time you spot a frame at the thrift store, go ahead and give a project like this a try. I found this gem in the thrift store while browsing through the vases and the flower pot section. I absolutely love the unique appearance of it, and I always recommend rummaging through that area because you can discover some incredible pieces to enhance your home decor. Transforming this was a breeze. I just added a touch of black spray paint and it completely revamped it. I think it would be perfect holding a cookbook in the kitchen and making it a stylish display. Another item I often come across in the kitchen area of the thrift stores is rolling pins, and all you need to upcycle these is some acrylic paint. Once you paint the handles and place them in a crock on your counter in your kitchen, they look fantastic. But you don't have to worry, the food's not going to come in contact with the painted handles, and we're also going to seal these up with some polyacrylic sealer to make them really durable. This not only adds a pop of color to your kitchen space, but it also is so incredibly easy to do. You'll always find rolling pins for really reasonable prices, and it's a DIY project that you can complete in an afternoon. Next time you visit the thrift store, keep an eye out for them. Grab some paint, an old pottery crock, and give this a try. It's a perfect way to display these rolling pins once they've completely dried. If you want, you can even grab some sandpaper and distress them, giving them a charming, well-loved look. I love the way it enhances the appearance of these rolling pins, and it always takes them to the next level, really effortlessly. Faux plants are always worth checking out at thrift stores. You've probably seen how pricey they can be at department stores. Some may seem a little bit tacky, so look for ones that are full, natural looking, and have really beautiful colors. I was thrilled when I found this ivy, and it was in a really cute little wicker basket. I think this one really resembles real ivy. It was a bit dusty and dirty. I took it to my kitchen sink and I gave it a good scrub with some soapy water. And after that, I placed it outside on the deck and let it dry in the warm sun. If gardening isn't your strong suit, faux plants are a perfect match. Lately, I've been fortunate enough to come across some really stunning ones. I have some spots in my home that don't receive much sunlight, so I'd like to place the faux plants there. It saves me the trouble of buying real plants that wouldn't thrive due to the lack of sunlight. These faux beauties require no green thumb and always look vibrant. It's a hassle-free way solution to bring some greenery into your space.